Chapter 3069, Two Enemies Joining Forces. Chapter 3069, 3069, Two Enemies Joining Forces. 3069, Two Enemies Joining Forces. The true body of extermination, the being who had obliterated the Genesis world of the previous era. Now, some unknown persons will have taken control of this body and unleashed a devastating power. This was a power far beyond the peak stage of the 7th tier. In fact, this was a power that could almost rival Hysteria's. Whoosh! Hysteria also launched an attack at the same time, swinging a tentacle at Ling Han. Ling Han threw a fist to meet their attacks. Boom! His body shuddered, and he retreated 1,500 kilometers. However, Hysteria and Extermination didn't fare any better, with Hysteria's tentacles sent flying and Extermination also sent soaring through the air. What's going on? The two beasts are actually joining forces? Ling Han proudly stood in the sky and peered down at Hysteria and Extermination. He then stared at Extermination and asked, "The 7 of them were coaxed here by you?" Extermination also stood in the sky, with her clothes fluttering in the gusts of energy. She was breathtakingly beautiful. So what if they were? And so what if they weren't? She retorted. Ling Han shook his head and remarked, "I'm truly becoming more and more confused. You people are actually trying to protect Hysteria? What? Have you all gone stupid as well?" Extermination looked at Ling Han and said disdainfully, "It's impossible to have a meaningful conversation with someone as ignorant as yourself." Ling Han roared with laughter and replied, "I can suppress 7th tier elites while at the 6th tier. So do you have any right to look down on me? Where is your courage coming from? Do you really think you can stop me? I can already rival you now, so it's only a matter of a few billion years before I can suppress all of you with a single hand. You might be growing more powerful, but are we not also growing more powerful?" Extermination sneered. Indeed, Extermination had been equally as powerful as Ling Han back then, and she was still equally as powerful as him now, even though he had already advanced in leaps and bounds. Perhaps Extermination's speed of advance could truly catch up to Ling Han's. "By the looks of it, you obtained many secrets from me at that time," Ling Han said. During his time in the central region of the Genesis world of the last era, he had been invaded by the world's will. Even though this had given him the ability to develop new dimensions, it was now clear that many of his secrets had been exposed to his opponent as well. Theoretically speaking, Extermination shouldn't have been able to replicate his footsteps even after learning of his secrets. This was because he had completed all of his foundations while still at the pseudo-heavenly Venerable tier. Yet, Extermination had surprisingly managed to grow stronger at an incredible pace. Hang on. As long as one obtains the ability to develop new dimensions, they'll be able to slowly manifest new dimensions even if they only started off with one. Given enough time, won't they also be able to reach the same level as the Genesis world? And just how powerful was Extermination to begin with? However, she most likely hadn't transformed into a dimension. So how was she able to suppress 7th tier ultimate elites as well? Perhaps she had also followed the same path as Ling Han and gathered the power of countless dimensions while still at the pseudo-heavenly Venerable tier? And this had allowed her to manifest the embryo of a Genesis world in her body? Perhaps her abilities hadn't been as insane as Ling Han's back then, and she had only possessed 100 or 200 dimensions. After obtaining the secret of nurturing new dimensions from Ling Han, however, a new door to power had been opened up for her. "It's a shame that I wasn't able to obtain all of your secrets," Extermination said with a sigh. "Otherwise, would I have left you alive until today?" Ling Han finally understood why the world's will had told him to join forces with Extermination at that time. It had said that this was the only way for them to defeat Hysteria. In reality, it was trying to convince Ling Han to reveal his hidden secrets to Extermination. However, Extermination had been forced to compete with Ling Han for the sake of the secret codes of life, and this had allowed Ling Han to discover some clues and guess the true identity of the world's will. It was none other than Extermination herself. Otherwise, Ling Han still had yet to reach the 5th tier at that time, and it would have been useless even if he had reached the 5th tier. He would have been completely unable to rival extermination, even after taking into account his ability to travel through dimensions. It was extremely likely that extermination could have seized an opportunity to kill him. After all, extermination was far more powerful than Chongyin and the others. What's this got to do with hysteria? Ling Han asked. Why should I tell you? Extermination replied coldly. Whoosh! Hysteria swung a tentacle and charged over. Even though it was confused as to why its predecessor was helping it, was there any reason not to take advantage of this situation? I'll stop him. You do what you have to do. Extermination said as she engaged in an intense battle with Ling Han. She was truly no weaker than Ling Han. Not only was her power immense, but she could even channel heavenly venerable seals. She was much like a second Ling Han, one that could entirely rival him. Everyone with a battle prowess at the 7th tier was engaged now, meaning that there was no one left to stop Hysteria. Boom! Hysteria seized this opportunity to counterattack, furiously attacking cities and engulfing land. In just a day's time, it reclaimed all of the lands that it had lost to Ling Han. With no 7th tier ultimate elite to stop him, it continued to charge forward at an increasing speed. Ling Han ignored extermination and charged at Hysteria. However, extermination immediately caught up to him again. The two of them were at a similar power level, so neither of them could easily run away from the other. Just extermination alone was able to stop Ling Han. Of course, the inverse was also true, and Ling Han could also stop extermination. In any case, the prerequisite to all this was the fact that Hysteria was powerful enough. Otherwise, if it were someone like Chongyin, Ling Han could send them flying to heaven knew where with a single strike. Hysteria was indeed slightly affected by Ling Han's attacks. However, this was still nowhere enough to stop its advance. Ling Han, abandon your feudal struggles and welcome the arrival of a glorious age, Extermination said. Her battle with Ling Han was genuinely meaningless. He couldn't wound her, and she couldn't wound him either. Neither of them was able to gain an advantage over the other. Thus, Extermination was clearly unwilling to engage in this battle any longer. Even if she wanted to kill Ling Han, it wouldn't be right now. Humph! Allowing Hysteria to engulf the Genesis world is your so-called glorious age? Ling Han retorted coldly. Have you forgotten what I told you before? Extermination asked with a proud voice. The 8th type of power is antithesis. After comprehensive destruction, what will follow is a flourishing world filled with even more life and vitality. What kind of new life will the destruction of the Genesis world bring? Ling Han questioned calmly. Such pathetic sympathy. Extermination scoffed in a cold voice. After reaching our level, is there still any need to care about those ants? Ling Han, we can join forces to break out of this small pond. No need. Ling Han replied in rejection. Then drown in the furious tides of time. Extermination said. She continued to engage with Ling Han, preventing him from charging over to obstruct Hysteria. The other ultimate elites were also fighting with each other, and this was yet another similarly meaningless battle. None of them suffered any wounds, and none of them were even shedding a single drop of blood. Only Hysteria continued to furiously advance. Ling Han furrowed his brows. With Extermination and the others stopping them, they would have no way of breaking free to stop Hysteria. What could they do? Leave, he suddenly exclaimed, using his divine sense to deliver this message. If this continued, the end result could only be them looking on helplessly as Hysteria engulfed the Genesis world bit by bit. If they left now, however, Ling Han would at least still have the opportunity to cultivate and grow stronger. Moreover, if they didn't do anything about this, it wouldn't be long before Hysteria reached the profound negative realm, where Ling Han and Lin Luo's friends and families were located. Thus, their best option right now was to retreat. Lin Luo and the others were all 7th-tier heavenly venerates, people who understood when to advance and when to retreat. They made up their minds in a split second, and they immediately dashed over to gather with Ling Han. Chapter 3070, 3070 Retreat. Chapter 3070, 3070 Retreat. 3070 Retreat. Ling Han and the 7 ultimate elites retreated. Extermination and the others didn't give chase. They were all at the 7th tier, and they were all indestructible and undying. So what difference would it make even if they caught up? They simply needed to guarantee that Hysteria could continue to advance. When Ling Han and the others retreated from the main battlefield, the elites fighting on the secondary battlefield also flew over. They had no option but to do so. Following the fall of the main battlefield, Hysteria continued to charge forward and move onto the secondary battlefield. Thus, how could these ordinary heavenly venerates stop the charge of a transcendent dimension? They naturally had no option but to retreat. The last time they had performed a full-scale retreat was when Hysteria had triggered a devastating storm of energy. Now, less than 1 epoch later, they were forced to perform another full-scale retreat. Just what was going on? Hadn't Ling Han joined the battle already? Why were they still being forced to retreat? Lin Luo revealed the reason, and this instantly caused deep astonishment and puzzlement to appear on everyone's faces. What was Extermination trying to do? In any case, it was somewhat understandable that Extermination was joining forces with Hysteria. After all, one of them was the past life, and one of them was the present life. Extermination's body had developed a new consciousness, and it wouldn't be surprising if this new consciousness had been affected by her old one. However, what had gotten into Chong Yin and the others? They had come from the Genesis world of the last era, so they clearly understood the fundamental nature of Extermination and Hysteria. That being the case, why were they still willing to join forces with them? No one was able to understand this. In the end, they could only explain it by saying that Chong Yin and the others had been bewitched. The problem was, they were indestructible and undying 7th-tier heavenly venerates, so how could they possibly be bewitched? Retreat first, Ling Han commanded. There was already no way to turn the tables now, especially since there were 2 supreme 7th-tier ultimate elites on Hysteria's side. Meanwhile, he was the only one on their side. In terms of ordinary 7th-tier ultimate elites, both sides had the same number. That being the case, how could they possibly block Hysteria? This was unless more 7th-tier elites rushed over to help them. Even then, they would only be able to slow Hysteria down by a little. Everyone fell back in retreat. Judging by the situation, it was inevitable that Hysteria would engulf the profound negative realm. How quickly it did so was entirely dependent on how quickly it could engulf things. And after Hysteria engulfed this transcendent dimension, how would Ling Han still be able to block it? They needed to pack their things and make some necessary preparations. That way, they would be able to immediately retreat when they were faced with insurmountable danger again. Ling Han parted ways with Lin Luo and the others. They all had their own families, so they naturally needed to find a safe place for them first. Only after this could they discuss their next steps. They needed to decide whether they would defend the profound negative realm or retreat to the next realm. Ling Han mulled over this as he walked. The first question was why Chong Yin and the others had defected to Hysteria. Since 7th-tier elites were indestructible and undying, this naturally couldn't be because they were afraid of death. Instead, Hysteria had definitely promised them some benefits. However, what benefits could they receive from doing this? The answer most likely lay in the world's core that Extermination had made up. Ling Han didn't believe it, but this didn't mean that Chong Yin and the others didn't believe it. They had most likely been told that they could advance to the 8th tier after obtaining the world's core. In addition to this, they had probably been enticed by the idea of breaking out of this small pond as well. These 7th-tier elites, people standing at the pinnacle of the world, were presumably very attracted to this idea. This was especially the case since they had already battled against Extermination for so long before this. Would they not feel exhausted both physically and mentally after all this time? After arriving in this new Genesis world, they no longer had any friends or family to take care of or share time with. There was nothing for them to feel attached to. At the same time, many 7th-tier elites also viewed all matter beneath them as nothing more than mere ants. That being the case, it was no surprise that they joined forces with Hysteria. Perhaps there was one additional reason on top of all this. That was, they had suffered great humiliation at the hands of Ling Han. so they wanted to borrow Hysteria's power to exact revenge. Forget about it. These 7 people were only minor characters in the scheme of things, so it wasn't important why they had decided to defect to Hysteria. When the time came, Ling Han would simply suppress them with a single hand. The most critical factor was extermination. What was her true identity? After obtaining the secret of manifesting new dimensions from him, her battle prowess had been allowed to grow to a terrifying level. Moreover, she was intent on jumping out of this so-called small pond. Hang on. Ling Han's eyes suddenly lit up. If extermination is genuinely the same as me, then her being at the 7th tier should allow her to elevate a dimension to the transcendent level as well. At that time, she would possess enough power to suppress me. However, this didn't happen. Extermination is at the 7th tier, and she's also someone who's lived for heaven knows how many years. Being as freakish as she is, she most likely possesses no fewer heavenly venerable seals than me, either. She was further in possession of a group of dimensions before, so her cultivation speed is definitely no lower than mine as well. So, she's in possession of a transcendent dimension, yet she was still only able to rival me, but not surpass me. What does this signify? She definitely possesses fewer dimensions than me. In other words, she didn't obtain the ability to manifest new dimensions. The glimmer in Ling Han's eyes grew brighter and brighter. If his speculation was correct, then extermination's ability to rival him was because she possessed a transcendent dimension inside her. In other words, she had a qualitative advantage over him. However, once Ling Han advanced to the 7th tier, he would also be able to raise a dimension inside him to the transcendent level. Or he could choose to raise more dimensions into high-tier, high-level dimensions. In any case, he could definitely regain his advantage. This is definitely the case. Otherwise, it will genuinely be impossible to stop Hysteria. He returned to his ancestral grounds, and those under the heavenly venerable tier were all drawn into the celestial guest residence by him. This was a heavenly venerate tool, and the space inside it was so large that it could rival a low-level dimension. As for the Empress, Hunyo, the karmic life heavenly venerable, and the others, they all sat around Ling Han as they listened to him explain the situation. They were heavenly venerates, so it wouldn't be too difficult for them to flee and stay alive, as long as they didn't directly challenge Hysteria or experience the comprehensive collapse of the Genesis world. What? They were shocked and petrified by what Ling Han told them. If news of this got out, it would definitely cause immense commotion to sweep throughout the entire Genesis world. It would cause everyone to freeze with fear, feeling as if doomsday were about to arrive. The karmic life heavenly venerable frowned and asked, "Why are they doing this?" "This isn't important anymore," he replied. "The most important thing is how we can stop these bastards." Everyone nodded in agreement. What would it matter even if they understood the reason behind Chong Yin and the others' betrayal? Could that change the current situation? Ling Han pondered for a moment and said, "I'll discuss this with Lin Luo and the others first. In fact, I've already drawn all of my clan members into the celestial guest residence already, so you guys may as well come along with me as well." Before coming here, he had already agreed with Lin Luo and the others to meet up at the ancestral grounds of the Lin clan after dealing with his personal matters. Even though there was no one left to obstruct Hysteria, it was a dimension, after all, so it could only engulf the land bit by bit. Thus, the profound negative realm was safe for the moment. However, this period of safety might only last for 1 billion years. Or perhaps it would even be as short as 100 million years. Ling Han led the others to the Lin clan. Xian Fu and Bai Fan had already arrived, and Zhou Hong and Chu Hao were naturally present as well since they were Lin Luo's disciples, and their ancestral grounds were also right next to each other's. They were only waiting on Wu Jihong and Blood Rainbow. After waiting for a dozen or so days, the 2 remaining 7th tier heavenly venerates finally arrived. The 8 most powerful men in the world sat down, surrounded by their disciples and descendants, all of them heavenly venerates. They quietly listened to the discussion of the 8 ultimate elites. In light of our current situation, what suggestions does everyone have? Lin Luo asked. He was the owner of this ancestral ground, so he was naturally playing host to this meeting as well. Those bastards! Bai Fan cursed as he slammed the table. His formidable aura seeped out, causing the heavenly venerates in the surroundings to become pale. They felt agonizing pain on their skin, and it was as if they were about to explode. Chapter 3071, 3071 Discussion. Chapter 3071, 3071 Discussion. 3071 Discussion. Chong Yin and the four others are from the Genesis world of the last era. After their world collapsed, and after slumbering for so many years, it's understandable that their way of thinking has changed, though this doesn't make them any more deserving of forgiveness. However, 10,000 Shadows and Golden Silk Moth? Humph. There was an intense look in Blood Rainbow's eyes, and his body was brimming with killing intent. 10,000 Shadows was only able to advance to the 7th tier thanks to the core fragments that we gave him, yet he's actually chosen to betray us now? Unforgivable. Xian Fu also spat with anger and ferocity in his eyes. They were so furious that they wanted to kill someone. However, this wish was nothing more than a pipe dream. 7th tier elites were undying, and this was the case even though 10,000 Shadows and Golden Silk Moth had only just advanced to this tier, and were far weaker than the others. Lin Luo waved his hand and said, "Since this has already become reality, talking about it anymore won't be of any help to us. What we need now is a plan to deal with the situation. This is the last transcendent dimension in the Genesis world, so we definitely have to defend it no matter the cost. Otherwise, everything will be done for," Wu Jihong opined. Ling Han shook his head and said, "We won't be able to defend it." Blood Rainbow frowned and said, "Don't ruin our morale." "It's the truth," Ling Han replied. He had dared to challenge 7th tier elites while still at the 5th tier, so he was naturally even more unafraid of 7th tier elites now. However, they were all on the same side, so his attitude was naturally more amiable. If we exclude Hysteria, the number of 7th tier elites in the enemy camp is coincidentally equal to ours. Moreover, their battle prowess is also very similar to ours. So, if we decide to battle them one-on-one, there'll obviously be no one left to stop Hysteria. The ultimate elites all fell silent. Speaking boldly was easy, but they couldn't choose to ignore this grim reality. Xian Fu turned to Ling Han and asked, "Then what do you suggest we do?" Ling Han pondered for a brief moment before replying, 1. Wait, and 2. Retreat. What did this mean? Everyone looked at Ling Han. They had no option but to admit that he had already become the backbone of the Genesis world. "It's impossible for us to defend the profound negative realm," Ling Han explained. "Since that's the case, our best option is to wait. We'll wait until Hysteria engulfs this dimension, and we'll pull the chestnut out of the fire at that time. We'll snatch the core of the dimension from under its nose. If we succeed, then Brother Xian, Brother Wu, Brother Bai, and Miss Lin will all have an opportunity to advance to the 7th tier. If they become 7th tier elites, then they'll also become indestructible, even if their battle prowess doesn't increase immediately. In any case, that will give them the right to face Hysteria. Even if it's only 4 of them, they'll at least be able to slow Hysteria down a little. In addition to this, we can continue to retreat all the way to a low-level dimension. We'll allow Hysteria to engulf all the other dimensions. This will buy us more time." Ling Han paused for a moment before continuing, "I still have a lot of room for improvement. I haven't even reached the peak stage of the 6th tier yet." The so-called peak stage of the 6th tier that he talked about wasn't referring to the 5 fundamental powers inside him reaching a consummate level. Instead, he was referring to the dimensions inside him elevating to a higher level. Everyone grimaced upon hearing this. Ling Han's battle prowess had been growing at a breakneck pace. From initially struggling to suppress an elite at the peak stage of the 7th tier, he had advanced to being able to suppress 5 ultimate elites by himself. A short while ago, he had even been able to rival Hysteria and force it to retreat. All of this was done by a 6th tier elite. With such incredible feats to his name, it wouldn't be surprising even if someone claimed that he was a 7th tier or 8th tier elite. However, he actually had yet to reach the peak stage of the 6th tier. Just how astonishing was this? Ling Han looked at everyone and said, We can get a move on now, relocate everyone in the medium-level dimensions, and try to move them all to the low-level dimensions. In fact, we can directly move everyone to the celestial realm that sits at the very end. We'll engage in a final battle with Hysteria there. This was far too bold and decisive, no? Retreating to the very end, to a place with no more room for retreat in a single step. How resolute. The 7 ultimate elites exchanged glances before falling deep in thought. If they retreated to the celestial realm, they would genuinely have nowhere left to retreat after that. They wouldn't even have the power to blow up the Genesis world to drag Hysteria down with them. That's impossible now, Ling Han said with a shake of his head. Since Hysteria has already fallen victim to this before, it definitely won't fall victim to it a second time. Everyone was disappointed upon hearing this. However, the 7 ultimate elites slowly nodded in agreement. They wouldn't fall at the same hurdle twice, either, so it was only natural that Hysteria was the same. In fact, Hysteria had potentially transformed into a dimension to avoid being attacked upon the destruction of the Genesis world. Its dimension was far too large, so it was indeed possible for it to avoid this calamity if it hid itself in some corner of the dimension. Very well. I accept your proposal, Lin Luo said, becoming the first ultimate elite to nod his head in approval. I also accept it, Zhou Heng said with a nod. Accepted, Chu Hao said, becoming the third person to vote. Xian Fu and the 3 others hesitated for a brief moment before eventually nodding slowly. Since Ling Han could still grow stronger, they might as well go all in on him. Since we've come to a consensus, let's get a move on now. Don't waste any time, Lin Luo said. They didn't ask anyone else for their opinion. If one weren't at the 7th tier, one wouldn't have the right to discuss these things with the ultimate elites. 7th tier, heavenly venerates were gods among the heavenly venerates. Ling Han traveled through the dimensions and relocated all the important people to the celestial realm first. He couldn't help but feel slightly emotional after returning to this familiar place. After traveling to so many places, was he ultimately going to resolve everything here? The other heavenly venerates naturally received news of the situation as well, so they all started to relocate to the celestial realm with their clans and families. To put it simply, everyone was trying their best to relocate as many people as they could. These were all living and feeling beings, so it was only natural that they wanted to save as many of them as possible. These people were all seeds of hope for the future. After resolving this potential worry, Ling Han entered seclusion and started to cultivate. The most important thing right now was his battle prowess. If he could wield a crushing power superior to that of his enemies, then he could naturally resolve all of the problems that they faced. Before entering seclusion, there was one matter that caused him to become slightly distracted. Wang Chuanha had disappeared. Ling Han couldn't find him no matter what, and it was as if he had simply vanished from the face of the world. It was as if he had never existed in the first place. However, he was a powerful heavenly venerate who was more than capable of protecting himself, and he was also a shockingly fortunate person who always came across rare opportunities. Thus, he most likely wouldn't face any danger. Ling Han pondered this for a short moment before waving away his worries for this descendant. He officially entered seclusion. He aroused all of the heavenly venerable seals inside him and used them to interact with the void, extracting a vast amount of fundamental power to temper his body. Meanwhile, his dimensions also started to develop with vigor, actively drawing energy from the void by themselves. They then transformed this energy into nutrients that could help them grow. Since these dimensions contain life force now, would it be possible for him to place living beings inside? Ling Han was contemplating the worst-case scenario where they failed to stop Hysteria. At that time, he would transform himself into a Genesis world to hold all living beings. Let's hope we never reach that stage. With this in mind, Ling Han decided to give it a test. He drew the Empress and the others into a dimension in his cell. The result was this success. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief. This meant that as long as he remained alive and undestroyed, those he cared about would also be able to stay safe forever. He focused his attention on cultivation. It was already a foregone conclusion that the profound negative realm would be destroyed by Hysteria. That being the case, they definitely had to snatch the core of the dimension, as this would allow them to nurture several more 7th-tier elites. Moreover, this might also allow Ling Han to elevate his cultivation and reach the peak stage of the 6th tier. Time. What he needed was time. Time flew by, and 600 million years passed in the blink of an eye. One day, Ling Han received news that the profound negative realm had almost completely been engulfed by Hysteria already. The core of the dimension was about to appear. Time to set off. Ling Han, Lin Luo, and the other 7th-tier heavenly venerates arrived at the profound negative realm. Right now, this transcendent dimension was already unable to live up to its name. It was so small that it could only compare to a small city. Chapter 3072, 3072, Fight for the Core. Chapter 3072, 3072, Fight for the Core. 3072, Fight for the Core. Only 8 people were part of the team that traveled to the profound negative realm. There was Ling Han, Lin Luo, and the 6 other ultimate elites. Others wouldn't be of any help even if they tagged along. Apart from Hysteria, their enemy was fully made up of 7th-tier ultimate elites such as Chong Yin and the others. These people were far too powerful. Nothing more needed to be said about extermination, while Chong Yin and the others had obtained the dimensions that once belonged to Feng Wuding. This allowed their battle prowess to increase by a significant amount. Someone with a battle prowess under the 7th tier participating in this battle would be nothing more than seeking death. Heh, sure enough, you people came? Extermination remarked as she proudly stood in the sky. Gusts of energy blew past, causing her sleeves to billow in the air and her raven hair to flutter in the wind. This caused her skin to appear even whiter and more delicate. She was a stunning beauty, yet she was also someone who could dictate the fate of the Genesis world of 2 separate eras. We're not allowed to come? Ling Han retorted calmly. It's meaningless even if you do come, Extermination replied in a similarly calm and nonchalant voice. It was as if she weren't worried about Ling Han at all. It was difficult to say whether this reflected her true feelings, but it at the very least gave her an advantage in terms of aura. Ling Han smiled and asked, "And just who do you think you are? It's meaningless just because you say so? We have to scurry back home just because you told us to? Since you've already come, there's no need to think about going home anymore. I'll suppress all of you here today," Extermination announced, with her raven hair fluttering in the wind. There was an indescribable beauty about her at this moment. She looked at Ling Han and continued in a baleful voice, "As for you, I'll slowly grind away your cultivation before extracting all of your secrets." "Heh, in your dreams," Ling Han snickered. The core of the dimension had yet to appear, and the ultimate elites on both sides were also undying people who were unable to kill each other. Thus, they didn't engage in battle right away. Instead, they threw insults at each other in an attempt to decrease their enemies' morale. Ling Han exchanged barbs with Extermination, while Lin Luo and the others exchanged barbs with Chong Yin and the other traitors. 10,000 shadows. I'll definitely slice open your chest to see what color your heart is, Bai Fan shouted as he glowered at 10,000 shadows. His face was filled with fury. He was a short-tempered person, and he detested ungrateful bastards like 10,000 shadows the most. 10,000 shadows naturally paid no heed to this. He had already advanced to the 7th tier, so why would he still care about any of this? He simply needed to act as he pleased. He didn't need to care about what others thought of him. He was indestructible and undying, so what could they do about him? Bai Fan, once I obtain the core of the dimension and advance to the peak stage of the 7th tier, just see how I dispose of you, he threatened calmly. Because of the length of time he had cultivated, his cultivation was indeed inferior to Bai Fan's right now. However, this wouldn't be the case once he advanced to the peak stage of the 7th tier. Perhaps there would still be a small difference in power between different heavenly venerates at the peak stage of the 7th tier. However, this difference definitely wouldn't be very big. The betrayal of Chong Yin and the others greatly angered Lin Luo and the other ultimate elites. Now that they were face to face again, their boiling anger naturally simmered to the fore. Initially, Ling Han's explosive increase in power had already allowed him to rival Hysteria and even push it back. In other words, he had already been powerful enough to eliminate the calamitous danger that Hysteria posed. Yet, the interference of extermination as well as Chong Yin and the others had thrown a spanner in the works, and instead caused the situation to become even direr. How could they not be furious? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Hysteria also appeared, brandishing its 9 tentacles and causing immense pressure to descend upon Ling Han and the others. The core of the dimension had yet to appear, yet everyone had already become tense and ready to explode at any moment. Wang. A column of brilliant light materialized, radiating with 18 different colors. The core of the dimension had appeared. Whoosh! Hysteria was the first to move, with its tentacles shooting toward the core of the dimension. However, Ling Han immediately moved as well, throwing a punch and forcefully pushing Hysteria back. Lin Luo, Chong Yin, and the others also started to move, giving rise to a chaotic battle. Ling Han, with me present, you won't be able to achieve anything, Extermination said as she dashed over. Her hands were like a heaven-splitting axe as they slashed down at Ling Han. Humph! Piss off! Ling Han roared as he replied with a destructive punch. Pung! Extermination was immediately sent flying. What? Extermination exclaimed in shock. Ling Han's power was actually growing even faster than hers? Even though the difference wasn't big, he was indeed slightly more powerful than her now. She sighed in her mind. She had transformed into the world's will before, and she had pretended to help Ling Han obtain 2 new abilities. In reality, however, she had been secretly stealing his secrets. However, she had only learned how to elevate dimensions to the transcendent level, and she had failed to learn how to manifest new dimensions. There were a total of 10,000 dimensions inside her, and this was already a remarkable and terrifying number. At that time, all of these dimensions had further been high-tier, high-level dimensions, equivalent to the power of 100,000 6th-tier elites. However, following the destruction of her previous body, all of these dimensions had suffered significant damage, with most of them directly collapsing. Meanwhile, the remaining ones were all severely damaged. This was also one of the main reasons why Hysteria had abandoned its old body and decided to start anew. Even though extermination was still domineering, there were only a few hundred dimensions remaining in her body. It was only because she had raised a few of them to the transcendent level that she was able to become so freakishly powerful. However, it was far too difficult to raise dimensions to the transcendent level. Moreover, she hadn't obtained as many secret codes of life as Ling Han, so this further caused the speed of her advance to slightly lag behind Ling Han's. Even though it was only by a tiny bit, this was still enough to give Ling Han an upper hand. Ling Han unleashed a battle cry as he unleashed increasingly ferocious attacks. Myriad transformations returned to one. Extermination cried as she made a pushing motion with her jade-like palms. A chaotic burst of energy that was filled with disorder and turmoil attempted to refine the entire world into one. Ling Han humphed coldly and unleashed a furious punch at her. Who cared what techniques she used? He would crush them with absolute power. He was brimming with confidence and self-belief. Pung! Extermination was sent flying again. The difference in power between them was only minuscule, yet in a battle between ultimate elites, this minuscule difference was often extremely critical and decisive. Hysteria charged over to join forces with extermination and battle Ling Han. Ling Han was unafraid, and he unleashed another battle cry as he faced off against the 2 most powerful enemies in the world. He appeared extremely lively as he fought against them. Lin Luo and the others all watched on with emotion. Thank heavens they had resolutely defended Ling Han in the past. Otherwise, following Chong Yin and the others' betrayal, they would be powerless to do anything but be suppressed. They wouldn't have any hope of turning the tables. The 2 sides continued to battle. However, Hysteria and Extermination were both incredibly vicious beings who were only slightly weaker than Ling Han, so after joining forces, they slowly started to gain the upper hand. After obtaining more dimensions, Chong Yin and the other traders were also more powerful than Lin Luo and the others now. Ling Han and his companions were suffering a full-scale disadvantage. What could they do? Ling Han bellowed and unleashed his full power as he charged at the core of the dimension. Now wasn't the time to engage in a life-or-death battle with Hysteria and the others. The core of the dimension was the most important thing. However, Hysteria and extermination naturally wouldn't allow Ling Han to snatch the core of the dimension so easily. They both charged after him, unleashing a barrage of attacks as they did so. The three supremely powerful beings continued to unleash furious attacks at each other as they fought for the core of the dimension. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Meanwhile, the core of the dimension continued to whiz around in the air. The profound negative realm had yet to fully die, so it was as if the core of the dimension were a living person who was unwilling to be obtained by anyone. Pong! The three Paragon elites exchanged another blow, unleashing a shock wave so powerful that the core of the dimension was instantly shattered into pieces. Wong! The shards of the core exploded in different directions. Hysteria and extermination attempted to grab them, yet Ling Han suddenly unleashed an explosive roar, after which boundless radiance started to shine from his body. His power increased by a whopping 8,000-fold. First Grade Seals. Chapter 3073, 3073 Secret of the World. Chapter 3073, 3073 Secret of the World. 3073 Secret of the World. Ling Han hadn't just been cultivating for the past few 100 million years. He had also deduced all of the first-grade seals at the same time. He had skipped over the second-grade seals and directly focused on deducing the first-grade seals instead. This was in order to maximize his battle prowess. However, he had never channeled these seals before, and this was because it would have been meaningless to do so. What would it have helped him even if he had suppressed Hysteria and extermination and pummeled them into the ground? They were undying and indestructible beings, after all. Now that he was at a critical stage of fighting for the core of the dimension, however, he no longer needed to hold back anymore. Boom! Ling Han glowed with brilliance as his power increased 8,000-fold, and even the pumping of his blood was so loud that it was as if heaven and earth were shattering into pieces. He threw a single punch, and it was as if all other actions descended into stillness, with only his fist continuing to tear through the air and illuminate the sky. Pong, pong. What did it matter that his opponent was Hysteria? What did it matter that his opponent was extermination? They were powerless in the face of such an explosive attack, and they had no option but to be sent flying back. Ling Han then charged toward Chong Yin and the others, sending them flying into the distance as well. This freed up Lin Luo and the others, and allowed them to dash around to gather the core fragments of the dimension. Ling Han. Extermination howled in fury. In just an instant, more than half of the core fragments had already been collected by Lin Luo and the others. She was seething with rage, yet she didn't charge forward to attack Ling Han again. Instead, she dashed toward the core fragments of the dimension. "Piss off!" she roared, throwing a palm strike and instantly blasting Exine Fu into the distance. This was an inevitable result as the gulf in power between them was far too great. She reached over again, and she quickly obtained a piece of the core fragment of the dimension. Elsewhere, Hysteria was also forcefully pushing its opponents aside, allowing it to obtain a piece of the core fragment. They were two of the most powerful beings in the world, after all, and apart from Ling Han, there was no one else who could rival their might. Ling Han looked around, and he saw that all of the core fragments had already been collected, with most of them falling into the hands of his allies. Seeing this, he roared, "Leave!" Lin Luo and the others left without any hesitation. They had come here with the goal of obtaining the core of the dimension, so since the core fragments had already been collected, what was the point of staying any longer? With Ling Han bringing up the rear, the 7 ultimate elites quickly retreated together. After Lin Luo and the others left, Ling Han stood guard at the 2-realm passageway and said calmly, "The next time we meet, only one party will make it out alive." Extermination and Hysteria stopped attacking him. Hysteria was unable to pursue Ling Han into different dimensions, while extermination alone was slightly weaker than Ling Han. That being the case, why would she pursue him alone? To ask for a beating? Humph. Who doesn't know how to speak boldly and boast? Regarding who will die at that time, you'll naturally find out soon, extermination said coldly. Ling Han turned around and left, paying no more heed to her. After returning to the celestial realm, Lin Luo and the others divided up the core fragments of the dimension. These were naturally given to Lin Yulian, Wu Haoyang, and the others. If they could advance to the 7th tier, they would naturally have a huge influence on the situation. Ling Han also received a few pieces of core fragments. He was the main force in the fight against Hysteria and extermination, so having him increase his strength was naturally the most important. He thought for a moment and decided against immediately using these core fragments. Instead, he stowed them away. There was still a little bit of time left, so he wanted to rely on his own efforts to reach the peak stage of the 6th tier. At that time, he would then use these core fragments to help him advance to the 7th tier. Of course, the chance of success was incredibly low. After all, even a complete core of the dimension might not be enough to help him advance to the 7th tier. Ling Han composed himself and pushed all other thoughts out of his mind. Right now, what he had to do was cultivate and grow stronger. This was the key to resolving everything. Lin Yulian, Xi and Chihu, and the others were also cultivating in seclusion and refining the core fragments of the dimension. Even if they were capable of advancing to the 7th tier, this wouldn't be anytime soon. Instead, it would take them hundreds of millions of years. Lin Luo and the others had nothing to do, so they traveled to the front lines and attempted to obstruct Hysteria's advance. That way, they could buy some time for Ling Han and the others. However, Chong Yin and the others were no pushovers, so Lin Luo and the others were unable to give Hysteria any trouble. Following the fall of the profound negative realm, there were no more transcendent dimensions in Hysteria's path. In fact, there weren't even any high-level dimensions in its path. Thus, the speed at which Hysteria engulfed these dimensions soared explosively, and it only needed a short 1 million years to engulf an entire dimension. Not only that, but the more dimensions Hysteria engulfed, the greater its speed would become. A few 100,000 years per dimension, 100,000 or so years for a dimension. When all of the medium-level dimensions were engulfed, Hysteria only needed tens of thousands of years to engulf an entire dimension. Fortunately, all of the heavenly venerates under the 7th tier were helping relocate the living beings of these dimensions. However, just how large was a dimension? There was only a limited number of heavenly venerates, so only less than 1% of living beings were actually moved to the celestial realm. 5 billion years later, Ling Han finally exited seclusion. He had already raised all of the dimensions inside him to high-tier high-level dimensions. Limited by his current cultivation level, this was already the highest he could raise them. He couldn't raise them to the transcendent level. At this moment, Bai Meifan, Lin Yulian, and the others also exited seclusion. Withstanding the huge pressure of expectations on them, they all successfully advanced to the 7th tier. Once they stabilized their cultivation, they would become extremely important helpers to Ling Han. Ling Han once again gathered Ning Haixin and the others, people who had a ball of light in their minds. Now that he had grown stronger, perhaps he would be able to discover more of the hidden secrets in these balls of light in their minds. This pertained to the secret origin of the Genesis world. This was the most valuable information in the world. They entered resonance using the balls of light in their minds again. Boom! Tumultuous waves crashed through their minds, causing Ning Haixin and the others to immediately lose consciousness. However, Ling Han was able to withstand this shock wave. In that short instant, he was able to observe many secrets. Why did Ning Haixin possess a powerful sense of affinity? Why was Ma Qinggao's divine sense so powerful? Why was Feiyu so skilled at comprehending formations? And why had Ling Han been so skilled in alchemy? He had been unreasonably skilled in alchemy. He could master any pill recipe immediately after learning it, and he could even create new pill recipes out of thin air. This was the secret code of the entire Genesis world. Before obtaining it, the secret codes of life had only been one part of the equation. Of course, They had been the most important part of the equation. Everything else could only be regarded as icing on the cake. Huge transformations started to take place inside Ling Han's body. Golden lotuses bloomed in his mind, with his comprehensions becoming as radiant as flowers. The secret codes of life that Ling Han had obtained all hovered to the surface. There were still some sections missing, yet these missing sections were automatically completing themselves at this moment, allowing the secret codes of life to form a ring. Ling Han could sense that he was resonating with people similar to him very far away. Moreover, he was resonating with more than one person. Extermination and Wang Chuanhe. It was as if they had all been linked together through space and time, and were capable of drawing out the fundamental nature of the world. Ling Han wasn't sure whether extermination had seen these secret codes of life or not. However, he felt like that short instant was far too little time for her to do so. He had been fully prepared, yet he had still almost missed the opportunity to observe them. Meanwhile, extermination had been completely unprepared. As such, it was unlikely that she had seen these secret codes of life. Ling Han digested this ring of secret codes, and he felt like his body was now undergoing some sort of mysterious transformation. However, he was unable to describe what this transformation was. Time quietly crept by, and another 900 million years passed just like that. Ling Han was forcefully awakened from his seclusion. This was inevitable as Hysteria had already advanced to the foreign realm. Once the foreign realm fell, the celestial realm would be next. If Hysteria engulfed these final two dimensions, then it would succeed in its goal to engulf the entire Genesis world. Chapter 3074, 3074 Heavenly Venerable Seals, complete. Chapter 3074, 3074 Heavenly Venerable Seals, complete. 3074 Heavenly Venerable Seals, complete. The final battle was about to begin. Ling Han made some final preparations, doing his best to move as many people as he could into the dimensions inside him. The small celestial realm was already exploding with people. There were countless dimensions inside Ling Han, and they were all high-level dimensions that were capable of hosting 6th-tier heavenly venerates. Including the Empress, Hunyeo, and the others, Ling Han decided to move all of them into his body. In this sense, no one could compare to Ling Han. Take Lin Luo, Zhou Hong, and the others, for example. They also had one or two dimensions inside them, and these dimensions had also been cultivated into high-tier high-level dimensions. However, they were unable to host life. Without a secret code of life, how could they possibly manifest life? Thus, only Ling Han was capable of doing this. Perhaps extermination was capable of it too, since she had also obtained some secret codes of life. It was just that she hadn't obtained as many as Ling Han. A while later, everyone under the 7th tier had already been moved into Ling Han's body. It was as if he had transformed into a Genesis world. In the outside world, only a measly few 7th tier ultimate elites remained. They included Lin Luo, Xian Fu, Wu Jihong, Bai Fan, and Blood Rainbow, the 5 experienced 7th tier heavenly venerates. In addition to them, there were also Zhou Hong, Chu Hao, Lin Yulian, Wu Haoyang, Xian Chihu, and Bai Maifan, the 6 newly advanced 7th tier heavenly venerates. All up, there were 11 7th tier heavenly venerates present. Including Ling Han, this was their final formation in the ultimate battle against Hysteria. The foreign realm was falling at a rapid pace. After engulfing almost all of the Genesis world, Hysteria had already become incredibly powerful at this moment. It was advancing at an insane speed, using only a measly 300 years to engulf the entire foreign realm. This was nothing more than a low-level dimension, so it was already unable to raise Hysteria's power by much. However, engulfing the entire Genesis world was a complete process that involved engulfing all of the dimensions, regardless of how powerful or weak they were. Hysteria couldn't give up on these dimensions simply because they were too weak. Otherwise, the process would be incomplete. Ling Han was still cultivating. Before this, he had been fully focused on investigating secrets of the Genesis world such as the secret codes of life. Thus, he still had yet to fully deduce the 2nd-grade heavenly venerable seals. Since he had spare time now, he decided to sit cross-legged and absorb the comprehensions in his mind. He had already obtained all of the secrets of the Genesis world, so with this as a foundation, deducing the heavenly venerable seals became as easy as could be. In any case, this was simply a process of interacting with the fundamental power of the Genesis world. In just 3 years, Ling Han opened his eyes again, revealing the dense array of symbols within them. He was clearly sitting right there, yet Lin Luo and the others suddenly felt as if he were distant and unreachable. It was as if Ling Han had entered another realm. Wang. With a single thought, 9 streams of symbols appeared on Ling Han's body. These were all of the heavenly venerable seals, from 9th grade seals all the way to 1st grade seals. Not a single one was missing. Each seal was resonating with the others, and even though they were releasing energy, they were also absorbing energy at the same time. This was an endless cycle of growth and rejuvenation. This was a perfect cycle, a complete system. Ling Han came to some sort of understanding, and another thought in his mind caused the 9 streams of symbols to fuse together again, transforming into a yin-yang diagram. Yin, yang, life, death, positive, and negative. These things were opposing, yet they were also mutually enabling. Ling Han tore open the void and casually snapped his fingers. Pong! A huge explosion instantly tore through the void, unleashing a petrifying destructive power. This was the result of his power increasing 100,000-fold. By channeling all of the heavenly venerable seals and fusing them together, Ling Han was surprisingly able to increase his power 100,000-fold. Pooh! Ling Han immediately spat a mouthful of blood. This power was far too immense, so much so that it placed a huge burden on Ling Han's body. His 6th-tier physique was actually unable to withstand it. Nearby, Lin Luo and the others were all wide-eyed with shock. The destructive power of this attack had been far too terrifying. Even they couldn't help but feel stunned. Would they genuinely be killed if they were struck by such an attack? Perhaps their physical body would remain unharmed, but their mind would most likely be shattered into pieces. Yet, Ling Han was still only at the 6th tier. How did he possess such unfathomable potential? However, it was incredibly difficult for Ling Han to unleash such an attack. After all, his body had yet to become indestructible, so he was still unable to withstand the flow of such immense power. Ling Han, how do you feel? Everyone asked. There was annoyance on Ling Han's face. He hadn't imagined that the problem wasn't his power being insufficient, but instead his physique being too weak to withstand the shock. Fortunately, the dimensions inside him all radiated with powerful life force. In just an instant, his slightly cracked skin had already healed and become as flawless as new. Heavenly venerates were detested by heaven and earth, so it was only natural that they wouldn't be nurtured by heaven and earth. However, the dimensions inside Ling Han were also his cells at the same time. They were a part of him, so why wouldn't they nurture him? Unleashing such an attack indeed put a significant burden on his body. However, as long as it wasn't too frequent, this was a burden that he could withstand. It's time for the final battle, Xian Fu announced. With his sharp sense as a 7th-tier ultimate elite, he could already sense an overwhelming aura charging over and exuding an indescribably powerful might. That was Hysteria, a being that had engulfed almost the entirety of the Genesis world. No one could imagine just how powerful it had become now. Pong! The earth shuddered, and the initially clear sky instantly became pitch black. Thankfully, they were all heavenly venerates, so they could see clearly even in absolute darkness. Countless tentacles descended from the sky, bearing down on the entire celestial realm. Hysteria had come. It wanted to engulf the final dimension and achieve its ultimate aim. This was the celestial realm, the realm where Ling Han had begun his journey. And now, it was going to become the final battleground. This was where everything had begun, and this was where everything would end. Charge! Ling Han and the others all charged forward, directly tearing open the void and leaping out of the dimension. Looking down from the void, they could see an indescribably large octopus reaching out with its countless tentacles, and encircling the entire celestial realm. To provide a sense of scale, Hysteria was like a large mountain, while the celestial realm was nothing more than a small blade of grass on the mountain. Ling Han and the others naturally wouldn't stand there idly. They all charged forward and unleashed a barrage of furious attacks at Hysteria, attempting to stop it from engulfing the celestial realm. Huh? Why don't you guys obediently shrink back into your shells like before? Wouldn't that be nice? Extermination said. She appeared before them with Chong Yin and the others. She swept her gaze over them, and she discovered that there were 4 new helpers in Lin Yuyin and the others. She couldn't help but smile and said, "Oh, so you found yourself some new helpers. No wonder you dare to come over to challenge us. However, it's not only you who has new helpers." She turned around and said, "Come on out." Wang. A figure walked over from extremely far away, radiating with a heaven-suppressing aura as he did so. This was a 7th-tier ultimate elite. Another 7th-tier ultimate elite had appeared in the world. However, disbelief and deep astonishment spread across Ling Han's face when he saw the appearance of this person. Wang Chuanhe. This newly advanced 7th-tier ultimate elite was actually Wang Chuanhe. How was this possible? To say nothing else, just how many years had passed? How was it possible to raise someone from the heavenly body tier to the 7th-tier heavenly venerable tier in such a short span of time? Moreover, Wang Chuanhe's cultivation talent could only be regarded as normal. If he were to cultivate by himself, it would be extremely difficult for him to even become a celestial king, to say nothing of becoming a heavenly venerate, a 7th-tier heavenly venerate. Now, however, Wang Chuanhe was standing right before them, radiating with the formidable aura of a 7th-tier ultimate elite. This was the reality. Chapter 3075, 3075 Beginning of the Final Battle. Chapter 3075, 3075 Beginning of the Final Battle. 3075 Beginning of the Final Battle. Are you surprised? Extermination asked as she looked at Ling Han. There was an eerie smile on her face. Indeed, Ling Han replied with a nod. He looked at Wang Chuanhe, his descendant across many generations. Back then, Ling Han had already had a vague feeling that he was perhaps releasing a sinister demon into the wild. However, Wang Chuanhe had been far too weak, so Ling Han had simply told Ling Jianxue to keep an eye on him, pushing him back onto the right track whenever he strayed. The problem was, Wang Chuanhe's fortune was far too freakish, so much so that he was able to soar to the heavenly venerable tier in spite of his mediocre talent and unstable cultivation. After Wang Chuanhe reached the heavenly venerable tier, it would naturally be far more difficult to keep an eye on him. Thus, he had suddenly disappeared into thin air one day. However, Ling Han still hadn't imagined that Wang Chuanhe would one day appear before him as a 7th-tier ultimate elite. Not only that, but he was also standing on the side of extermination and hysteria. Why? By doing this, are you still able to keep a clear conscience? Ling Han asked. There's already no one else I care for in this world, Wang Chuanhe replied coldly. Since that's the case, so what if it's destroyed? Moreover, you were clearly the most powerful heavenly venerate at that time, yet you failed to travel around to look for your descendants. It was your actions that led to the destruction of the Wang clan. He paused for a moment, and an intense glimmer appeared in his eyes, revealing his uncontrollable rage. Let me ask you, are you able to keep a clear conscience? This person was far too extreme. It's not too late to turn around and repent, Ling Han said in a solemn voice. Otherwise, I won't show any mercy. Haha, my body is indestructible, so how are you going to suppress me? Wang Chuanhe sneered coldly. He surprisingly took the initiative and charged at Ling Han. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. He launched 3 palm strikes in quick succession, with each strike carrying his full 7th-tier power. These were incredibly powerful attacks. However, could ordinary 7th-tier ultimate elites phase Ling Han now? He simply replied with a casual tap of his finger, easily blocking all of Wang Chuanhe's attacks. However, with Wang Chuanhe holding him back, could Lin Luo and the others stop Hysteria? Clearly not. Even though they had 4 more 7th-tier elites than before, Extermination was able to easily block all of them by herself. Enjoy the show. This is something that only 7th-tier elites have the honor to watch. Extermination said with loud laughter. It was as if she had become one with the void. Ling Han, Lin Luo, and the others exclaimed. I'll go. Bai Meifan roared as he charged over, attempting to block Wang Chuanhe for Ling Han. That way, he could free their most powerful main force in Ling Han. However, would Extermination allow this? She launched a strike with her slender hand. Pong! A cloud of blood instantly exploded from Bai Meifan's body. Everyone was stunned upon seeing this. 7th-tier ultimate elites were undying and indestructible. Yet, Bai Meifan was bleeding after facing a single strike? How could they not feel numb with shock? Did 7th-tier elites ultimately have to face death as well? Ling Han's pupils contracted. Sure enough, Extermination's battle prowess had also increased in leaps and bounds. She had most likely cultivated another dimension to the transcendent level, which allowed her power to increase explosively. It was because of this that she could wound 7th-tier elites with a single strike. He couldn't waste his time on Wang Chuanhe anymore. Otherwise, to say nothing of stopping Hysteria, all of his companions would be killed by Extermination. Freeze! Ling Han commanded as he made a tapping motion at Wang Chuanhe. A devastating restrictive power crashed down, forcefully pushing the groaning Wang Chuanhe into the ground. With a roar, Ling Han then charged at Extermination. Come! Extermination cried as she charged over to meet Ling Han. Pong! The two of them exchanged a blow, causing their clothes to violently billow amid the void windstorms that were countless times more powerful than energy shock waves. The windstorms rapidly permeated into the surroundings. Lin Luo, Chong Yin, and the others were all sent flying upon being struck by this storm. They were completely unable to withstand it. They were all at the 7th tier, yet the gulf between them was clearly immense. I'll deal with her. You guys go over to stop Hysteria, Ling Han said. Understood. Lin Luo and the others replied as they charged at Hysteria. Chong Yin and the others tried to stop them, yet being fewer in number, they were naturally unable to fully stop Chong Yin and the others. Several attacks instantly slammed into Hysteria. However, Hysteria didn't react at all, and it simply extended its tentacles to tightly wrap around the celestial realm. It had grown several times more powerful again. The attacks of 7th tier elites had been unable to wound it in the past, so this was further the case right now. The attacks were completely unable to affect it at all. At this moment, Hysteria was only a single step away from achieving its dream. Once it engulfed this realm, it would be able to replace the Genesis world. At that time, it would be able to do as it pleased. Thus, did it need to pay any heed to these measly insects? Ling Han frowned and immediately charged at Hysteria. Heh, your opponent is me, Extermination said as she lashed out in an attempt to stop Ling Han. Piss off, Ling Han roared. He unleashed a punch, and a single symbol lit up on his forehead. An intensely cold chill gripped at Extermination's heart, and she surprisingly felt an immense sense of fear so powerful that she almost didn't dare to face this strike. However, she immediately composed herself and replied with a punch on her own. They were both the most powerful beings in the world, so what was there for her to be afraid of? Pong! Ling Han's punch struck Extermination head-on, instantly causing her to grunt in pain. She retreated rapidly, with blood furiously pouring from her mouth. What? She was unable to accept this. Not only had her full power strike failed to rival Ling Han, but she had even been wounded. Ling Han's punch had been far too terrifying. Ling Han retracted his fist, with blood also seeping from the skin all over his body. Just then, he activated all of his heavenly venerable seals and increased his power 100,000-fold. However, this had also placed a huge burden on his body. In any case, he was indeed able to wound even Extermination after unleashing this powerful trump card. Ling Han turned around and charged at Hysteria. Pong! He threw a punch, and a powerful energy wave gathered on his fist. The further his fist traveled, the more layers this energy wave would gain. It was as if the void were being compressed by him and smashing toward Hysteria along with his fist. This strike was far too terrifying. Hysteria roared upon being struck, and it immediately retracted all of its tentacles like an ordinary mortal pulling their hand back from an open flame. Hysteria was colossal as it lay in the void, and it brandished its countless tentacles around as it glared at Ling Han with its huge eyes. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Hundreds of tentacles slammed over. Ling Han swung his fists to block these attacks. Pong, pong, pong. Each swing of his fist was able to send a tentacle flying. His movements were insanely quick, and after throwing several thousand punches, Hysteria finally stopped attacking him with its tentacles. This was because its tentacles were pulsating with light in an extremely unstable manner. It had been wounded during their fierce exchanges. Ling Han was also drenched in blood. He had channeled his supreme combination seal, so each attack had caused him to suffer some light wounds. With all the light wounds combined together, this was naturally no longer a light wound. However, what could he do? If he didn't unleash this power, how could he possibly force Hysteria to retreat? Ling Han, you're truly full of surprises, Extermination said as she slowly strolled over in the void. However, you can't stop this inevitable trend of the time. Boom! Hysteria and Extermination joined forces to unleash frenzied attacks at Ling Han. To make the impossible possible and to defy the will of the heavens, this is what it means to be a cultivator. Ling Han roared as he charged over to face their attacks. The final battle officially began. Chapter 3076, 3076 Death. Chapter 3076, 3076 Death. 3076 Death. The battle between Ling Han, Hysteria, and Extermination had already transcended the level of ordinary 7th-tier elites. This wasn't a battle that Lin Luo, Chong Yin, and the others could interfere in. Even though Hysteria and Extermination were theoretically nothing more than ordinary 7th-tier elites, with Ling Han further being only a 6th-tier elite, they were still far more powerful than the other ultimate elites at the peak stage of the 7th tier. Ling Han fought fiercely with his enemies. He was incredibly powerful and grasping all of the heavenly Venerable seals. His explosive power could genuinely be viewed as unfathomably terrifying. In fact, it was possible that he could damage or even obliterate the body of a 7th tier heavenly Venerate with a single strike. However, Hysteria and Extermination were also unimaginably powerful. After blocking most of the power from his strikes, their indestructible physiques were more than capable of withstanding the remaining power. In contrast to them, Ling Han was only at the 6th tier, so his physique was his glaring weakness. As the battle dragged on, this glaring weakness also became more and more obvious. He was covered in blood, and even his meridians were starting to become chaotic. It was as if they were about to explode. Ling Han, the arrival of a new age is inevitable, yet you still insist on going against the flow. This can only result in death. Extermination said with loud laughter. Even though she was being pushed back with Hysteria, neither of them had suffered any genuine wounds to speak of. Instead, it was Ling Han who was becoming increasingly wounded. This would eventually lead to his demise. Why don't you embrace this new age? Ling Han roared with laughter and chided. What bullsh *T new age? I'll crush them all. Foolish. Extermination spat with an ice-cold expression. If that's your choice, then you can go and die now. The two supremely powerful beings unleashed a barrage of relentless attacks at Ling Han, forcing him to unleash his full strength. They didn't give him any chance to recover, and they forced him to hurt himself more and more. If this continued, whether for a dozen years or 100 years, Ling Han would eventually succumb to his own self-inflicted wounds. Lin Luo and the others naturally understood the situation. They were all extremely worried, yet this wasn't a battle that they could interfere in. If they charged over, being sent flying would be the least of their worries. It was even possible that they might be crushed into smithereens. Haha. Chong Yin, and the others were filled with delight. They had all been bullied by Ling Han before, and the 5 ultimate elites from the previous generation had all experienced suppression at his hands. Meanwhile, Golden Silk Moth had almost become Ling Han's servant. As for 10,000 Shadows, he would immediately flee whenever he saw Ling Han. These were all humiliating memories. Now that Ling Han was in such a miserable state, they were naturally feeling as delighted and satisfied as could be. This little brat is finally facing his reckoning. We've already let him live for so long, so it is indeed time for us to end his pathetic life. Shut your traps. Bai Meifan bellowed in anger. He unleashed an attack at the traitorous 7th-tier elites. However, their strength was similar, and 7th-tier elites were also unable to wound fellow 7th-tier elites. Thus, Chong Yin and the others wouldn't be affected even if they didn't try to block this attack. However, 7th-tier elites naturally cared about their face. After all, who wanted to be sent flying for no reason? Thus, Chong Yin and the others all decided to counterattack. An intense battle broke out among them again. Ling Han was also aware of his current situation. If this continued, it would only be a matter of time before he was inevitably ripped apart by the devastating power surging within him. However, he definitely couldn't die. Otherwise, everyone in the dimensions inside him would die as well. So, what could he do? Retreat? And allow Hysteria to engulf the celestial realm? No. Ling Han shook his head in his mind. There was only one option left. He retrieved several core fragments of the dimension and pressed them to his chest, immediately starting to refine them. These were the core fragments of the profound negative realm, and he hadn't used them this entire time. He had saved them up for this exact moment, the moment when he attempted to break through to the 7th tier. Right now, he needed the physique of a 7th tier elite. This was the decisive moment. Could he sense the 6th type of fundamental power while facing such immense pressure? If he could, and if he managed to extract a wisp to temper his body, then he could immediately obtain an indestructible 7th tier physique. At that time, the burden that caused his skin to crack and blood to seep from his mouth would be nothing more than a mere tickle. At that time, hysteria and extermination would no longer be a threat. Not only that, but he would also be able to cultivate his dimensions to the transcendent level. This would allow him to grow more and more powerful, to a stage where hysteria and extermination would have no option but to be suppressed by him. Come, let me take a gamble. Ling Han refined the core fragments of the dimension. This was because dimensions naturally extracted fundamental power from the void, as well before transforming it into something that they could use. Moreover, this fundamental power was extracted and transformed through the cores of the dimensions. Thus, refining the core of a dimension would allow one to lay eyes on the fundamental power of the Genesis world. More importantly, Ling Han was far too powerful, and this severely inhibited him from detecting the last fundamental power of the Genesis world. Moreover, these were only core fragments of the dimension, and not a complete core of the dimension, so the power they contained would definitely be far inferior in comparison. Thus, everything was reliant on Ling Han being able to withstand this immense pressure. Come, come, come. Ling Han roared in his mind. His follicles opened up, and he attempted to detect that last remaining fundamental power. Hysteria and extermination naturally noticed this, so they both increased the speed and ferocity of their attacks in an attempt to distract Ling Han and prevent him from advancing to the 7th tier. Boom, boom. The battle between them was intense, and Ling Han continued to vomit large mouthfuls of blood. This wasn't as a result of being wounded by hysteria or extermination, but instead as a result of unleashing his supremely powerful attacks. His wounds became increasingly severe, and his recovery speed was unable to keep up with them, even though the dimensions inside him were brimming with powerful life force. A cruel smile tugged at the corners of Extermination's mouth, and she murmured, "Die, hurry up and die already. I can't wait to swallow your body and obtain all of your secrets." Ling Han didn't reply. Instead, he fought against them with his full power. 1 day, 3 days, 10 days. This was far longer than what Hysteria and Extermination had expected. Ling Han had actually managed to hold on for so long. However, his situation was also becoming increasingly dire. His willpower was simply terrifying. It all ends here. Extermination sneered coldly. Her attacks became even more ferocious. Pung! Clouds of blood exploded from Ling Han's body, after which he was no longer able to defend himself. Would Hysteria and Extermination go easy on him because of this? No. They would naturally seize this opportunity to kill him once and for all. Their attacks furiously slammed into Ling Han, whose body had yet to become undying and indestructible. Thus, they could genuinely kill him if they managed to breach his defenses. Boom, boom, boom. Boundless energy windstorms erupted, with the two formidable beings frenzied as they attacked Ling Han. This was utterly terrifying. Lin Luo, Chong Yin, and the others were unable to see clearly through the wild storms of energy. However, they understood that Ling Han was most likely facing a perilous situation with little hope of recovery. After all, he was only at the 6th tier, so it was inevitable that he would be crushed to death once his defenses were breached. Lin Luo and the others were filled with panic. However, to say nothing of the fact that they were being obstructed by Chong Yin and his ilk, what could they do even if they charged over? Could they stop Hysteria and Extermination? Any one of them would be able to severely wound or even kill them. What could they do? Was this the end? Was it already impossible to rectify the situation? Hysteria and Extermination finally ceased their attacks. The energy windstorms also started to slowly dissipate. When the void stabilized again, what they saw was Ling Han hovering in the void, with his limbs hanging by his side and his body drowned in blood. Was he dead? The expressions of Lin Luo and the others changed drastically. They could no longer sense any life force from Ling Han. Everything was truly done for. Ha 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 ha. Meanwhile, Chong Yin and the others all chortled with laughter. They had already waited far too long for this day. Extermination suddenly turned around. Just then, she had already been walking over to kill Lin Luo and the others. Hysteria also stopped in its tracks. It had initially been slithering over to engulf the celestial realm. Hovering in the void, Ling Han's finger moved ever so slightly. Chapter 3077, 3077 7th Tier. Chapter 3077, 3077 7th Tier. 3077 7th Tier. Ling Han, Lin Luo, and the others exclaimed. They were all filled with delight. Boom! A powerful aura suddenly erupted from Ling Han's body, and it was as if torrential waves were crashing into the surroundings. This brat didn't die. Not only that, but he even advanced to the 7th tier. Extermination muttered in disbelief. Her raven hair danced wildly in the wind, reflecting the disorderly emotions in her mind. How is this possible? He had suffered severe self-inflicted wounds and shattered his own defenses, after which he had been furiously attacked by two of the most powerful 7th-tier ultimate elites in the world. Moreover, he didn't possess the indestructible body of a 7th-tier elite, so he should have been killed as comprehensively as could be. I've yet to obliterate you people, so how can I die so easily? Ling Han said as he suddenly stood up straight. He was still drenched in blood, and he was still riddled with wounds. At this moment, however, he was filled with soaring spirit and energy. How is this possible? Extermination spat through gritted teeth. She couldn't accept this reality. Being attacked by her and Hysteria was no joke. This wasn't something that one could overcome through grit and determination alone. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Don't you two know? The more pressure I'm under, the more motivation I feel." It was in that moment of life or death that he had borrowed the power of the core fragment to initiate communication with the 6th type of fundamental power. Even though he had only extracted a wisp of this fundamental power, it had been enough to elevate his physique to a state of indestructibility. Add to that the overwhelming powers of dimension inside him, and he was naturally able to withstand the frenzied attacks of the two supremely powerful beings. His strength was almost identical to before, Yet his physique had finally reached a state of indestructibility. This signified that he had no more weaknesses. He was flawless. "Come, let me show you true strength," Ling Han said with loud laughter. He actively charged at Hysteria and Extermination, swinging his fists and unleashing a barrage of wild attacks. Pong! It was only one strike, yet Extermination was already sent flying. Another strike, and Hysteria's colossal body was sent flying as well. It was as if Hysteria were a giant toy being tossed through the air. After advancing to the 7th tier, Ling Han's power was now unrivaled, and his physique was now indestructible. This was a most perfect form. Hysteria and Extermination bellowed in fury as they charged back over. However, against this peerless man, they could do nothing but grit their teeth and endure punishment. In reality, this was quite similar to before. Ling Han attacked, while the two of them defended. In the past, however, Ling Han would suffer self-inflicted wounds while he attacked them. Moreover, these wounds would increase in severity until he eventually shattered his own defenses. But now? Ling Han had already resolved this problem. His body was now invincible, and he no longer needed to worry about wounding himself from the huge burden. What can we do? It was now Hysteria and Extermination's turn to feel worried. Now that Ling Han had advanced to the 7th tier, it signified that there was still more room for his battle prowess to grow. All he needed was some time. In other words, Hysteria and Extermination would remain at the same level, while Ling Han would gradually grow stronger and stronger as he fought. If this continued, there would eventually come a day when they were defeated, suppressed, or even killed. Hysteria became truly wild at this moment, swinging its tentacles in a crazy manner and acting as if it wanted to suppress Ling Han. However, what use would this be? "You block him first," Extermination suddenly said to Hysteria using her divine sense. With a flash, she rapidly retreated from the battlefield. Ling Han frowned slightly. However, only Hysteria was capable of swallowing the celestial realm, so it was this monster that he needed to pay the most attention to. He didn't need to pay much attention to the others. Once he disposed of Hysteria, the catastrophic threat lingering over the Genesis world would also be swept away. At that time, Extermination wouldn't be able to do anything regardless of how powerful she was. One had to realize that the Genesis world was also filled with life and vitality. Even though there was only a single dimension remaining, this dimension could still slowly manifest new dimensions, eventually leading to a flourishing situation just like before. He continued to pummel Hysteria. Just his raw power alone was already enough to rival Hysteria, or perhaps even suppress it. Now that his power had increased 100,000-fold, just how devastating was the situation? Hysteria was instantly forced to scramble back and retreat. Without Extermination helping it, it was completely unable to block Ling Han's attacks. Ling Han gave chase and was just about to suppress Hysteria. However, he suddenly felt a dull pain in his chest, and his attack immediately skewed to the side and missed its target. What's going on? Wasn't he an invincible 7th tier elite? So why was he still feeling pain in his chest? Ling Han didn't give this much thought, and he threw another punch at Hysteria. However, he felt another burst of pain in his chest, a pain so uncomfortable that he could barely control himself. This was definitely no coincidence. Ling Han swept his gaze over the surroundings. This was definitely related to Extermination. Otherwise, she wouldn't have left the battlefield for no reason. "Looking for me?" Extermination asked. Using her formidable power, she could rapidly send her words to anywhere in the void. She walked over, holding someone in her hand. Wang Chuanhe. He had already been suppressed by Ling Han just then. Regardless, he wouldn't have been able to rival Extermination even if he were at his peak state. Ling Han's pupils contracted. Perhaps the pain in his chest was related to Wang Chuanhe? Extermination. What are you doing? Wang Chuanhe howled in fury. If I hadn't wanted to use you as a backup plan, would I have raised you with all my effort and even destroyed a dimension to help you advance to the 7th tier? Extermination sneered. It's time for you to show your worth now. What? It was because extermination had destroyed one of her dimensions that Wang Chuanhe was able to advance to the 7th tier. Since these were dimensions, they naturally had dimension cores as well. Moreover, extermination possessed transcendent dimensions inside her, so bestowing Wang Chuanhe with a dimension core from one of these dimensions was indeed enough to raise him to the 7th tier. One had to realize that a transcendent dimension was equivalent to at least 10 7th tier elites. Thus, paying such a huge price to raise a single 7th tier elite could be regarded as extremely extravagant. Extermination was no charitable person, either, so why had she decided to help Wang Chuanhe? This is called the blood murder technique. Extermination explained calmly. As long as two people share the same bloodline, this technique will allow me to wound one person and therefore wound the other person at the same time. However, if the target is too powerful, the person being wounded by the technique also needs to be powerful enough. So that's why I helped him advance to the 7th tier. Extermination smiled and continued, I initially thought that this was an unnecessary plan, one that needlessly caused me to lose a significant amount of my battle prowess. Now, however, it looks like I was very correct to take such extreme measures. Ling Han, you truly can't be underestimated. As she said this, she stabbed her fingers into Wang Chuanhe's chest. This was extremely uncanny, and Ling Han immediately felt a piercing pain in his chest as well. It was as if his heart were about to explode. Gasp! This blood murder technique is truly powerful. Extermination, you'll definitely suffer a wretched death, Wang Chuanhe roared. Shut up, Extermination ordered coldly. You should already count yourself lucky that a piece of trash like you was able to witness the secrets of the 7th tier. Did you really think I took a fancy to a useless fool like you? Ling Han came to a sudden realization. No wonder Wang Chuanhe had betrayed him so resolutely. As it turned out, part of the reason had been the feeling of affection between him and Extermination. Extermination was indeed a breathtaking beauty, and Wang Chuanhe was also someone who had suffered a tragedy when it came to love. Thus, it wasn't strange that he had fallen for Extermination's purposeful seduction. Even though Ling Han found this plan a little shameless, he couldn't help but admire Extermination for her resoluteness and farsightedness. She had sacrificed so much power and effort simply to raise a pawn that she most likely wouldn't need to use. Chapter 3078, Engulfing the World. Chapter 3078, Engulfing the World. 3078 Engulfing the World. To sacrifice a dimension, a transcendent level dimension? Even Ling Han would be reluctant to do this if he only had a set number of dimensions. Extermination was truly a resolute and ruthless person. Ancestor, I was wrong, Wang Chuanhe cried. He tried to unleash his 7th tier power to fight against Extermination, yet the gulf between them was far too great. Before Extermination, he was like a newborn chick standing in front of a vicious old eagle. He couldn't resist at all. Ling Han wanted to charge over, yet Extermination simply launched a palm strike at Wang Chuanhe. Ling Han wildly vomited blood, and he was instantly stopped cold in his tracks. This so-called blood murder technique was definitely no ordinary secret technique. Instead, this was most likely a secret technique that pertained to the secret of the Genesis world. Ling Han was powerless to do anything. Extermination had paid such a heavy price to gain this advantage, so how could it be something that was easy to resolve? Are you not going to hurry up and finish your job? Extermination roared at Hysteria. Hysteria glared at her for a moment. This was its body from the previous era, yet it couldn't help but feel extremely distant and unfamiliar with it at this moment. Just what kind of being was Hysteria? It was naturally ticked off at being ordered around like this. However, it still suppressed its anger. Once it engulfed the celestial realm, the power of the entire Genesis world would flow into its body. At that time, it would become the most powerful being in the world. It would be able to suppress and kill anyone it wanted. Very well, I'll let you enjoy your arrogance for a while longer. Hysteria flew toward the celestial realm. It had only formed a temporary alliance with Extermination, and it naturally wouldn't tolerate someone being more powerful than it and ordering it around. Ling Han wanted to stop Hysteria, yet he couldn't move his body at all. Extermination simply needed to strike Wang Chuanhe, and this would immediately cause him to suffer severe wounds. His face was as white as a sheet. He was definitely more durable than Wang Chuanhe, and he wouldn't be killed even if Wang Chuanhe was killed by extermination. The problem was, extermination simply needed to obstruct him and give Hysteria enough time to engulf the final dimension. What about Lin Luo and the others? They were completely powerless to do anything. So, what could they do now? Even though Ling Han had already advanced to the 7th tier, gaining peerless power, he was still unable to prevent the worst-case scenario from playing out. Lin Luo and the others dearly wished that this was nothing more than a nightmare that they would wake up from. However, Hysteria had already wrapped its tentacles around the celestial realm and started to engulf it again. With its insane speed, it would only need a maximum of 10 years to destroy the celestial realm. 10 years? Could Ling Han turn the tables in such a short amount of time? Looking at the current situation, Ling Han was completely suppressed by the blood murder technique and unable to break free. The key to everything was Wang Chuanhe. Lin Luo and the others were all brimming with killing intent. If they could kill Wang Chuanhe, then Ling Han would also be set free. Die! Lin Luo and the others charged at extermination. However, Chong Yin and the others were no pushovers, so with them in the way, only 4 of them managed to arrive before extermination. Here to seek death? Extermination asked in amusement as she unleashed a palm strike. Pa, 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 pa. The 4 people were immediately sent flying, vomiting blood as they crashed through the air. Extermination was no match for Ling Han, yet she possessed an absolute advantage over the other 7th-tier elites. None of them could withstand a single strike from her. To say nothing to 4 7th-tier elites, even 10 7th-tier elites would make no difference if they charged up to her. Ha 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 ha. Extermination roared with laughter. Her long hair billowed in the wind, and her slender body swayed slightly. She appeared as breathtaking and seductive as could be. Her victory was already set in stone. 1 month, 6 months, 12 months. Lin Luo and the others were powerless as they watched the celestial realm rapidly shrink piece by piece. Meanwhile, Hysteria was seemingly undergoing some kind of transformation as well. To gather the power of the entire Genesis world into one body, just what kind of qualitative change would this lead to? Ling Han was still unable to stand up. Even though Wang Chuanhe had already been dismembered by extermination, just how powerful was a 7th-tier elite's life force? Thus, he didn't die even though he had suffered such severe wounds. In fact, 7th-tier elites couldn't even commit suicide. 3 years, 5 years, 8 years. The celestial realm was already in its death throes. Meanwhile, the initially pitch-black Hysteria surprisingly started to transform as well. It first turned white, before turning silver, and then finally toward gold. It transformed slowly, and it was very likely that it would become completely golden once it finished engulfing the celestial realm. 9 years, 9 years and a half. The celestial realm was about to expose its core. It was also at this moment that Wang Chuanhe was finally tortured to death by extermination. 7th-tier heavenly venerates were indeed undying, but this was also dependent on the situation. For example, Yellow Sand and the extermination's previous self had both been killed by the destructive power of the Genesis world of the previous era. Now that extermination's strength had also reached a similar level, it was only natural that she was able to kill a 7th-tier elite as well. Arg! Wang Chuanhe wailed in agony as his soul floated out of his body, which had already been completely obliterated. Lin Luo and the others didn't feel a shred of sympathy. He had chosen this fate himself. After all, who told him to side with extermination and Hysteria? Scheming with sinister individuals would naturally lead to a wretched death. Now for the final strike. Extermination said as she jabbed her slender finger at Wang Chuanhe's divine sense. Comparatively speaking, the divine senses of 7th-tier elites were far weaker than their physical bodies. Pa! Wang Chuanha's divine sense was instantly obliterated. He was as dead could be. Ah! Ling Han clasped his head in agony. Under the influence of the blood murder technique, it was as if a blade had been violently plunged into his divine sense. This caused a splitting pain to engulf his head. In the next instant, however, he had already dashed forward. His target was none other than Hysteria. He had to stop it. There was almost no time remaining. Now that Wang Chuanha had died, Ling Han had no time to worry about whether he should feel sympathy or apathy toward this extreme descendant. Ling Han charged over and threw a furious punch. Wang! Like waves in a pond, golden light rippled across Hysteria's body. The power of Ling Han's strike was completely dissipated over Hysteria's colossal body, reducing its destructive power by countless times. As such, it was completely unable to wound Hysteria. Meanwhile, Hysteria didn't waste any time as it continued to ravenously engulf the celestial realm. Ling Han roared and threw another punch. Pong! Extermination dashed over in a timely manner, blocking his strike with her palm. Even though she was sent flying, her interference still succeeded in blocking most of Ling Han's power. Hysteria faced this attack head-on as it watched the celestial realm collapse completely. The core of the dimension flew out, and it was as if it wanted to engage in a final struggle. However, the entire celestial realm was already surrounded by Hysteria, so how could the core of the dimension escape? Hysteria widened its maws and swallowed the core. Spit it out! Ling Han roared as he furiously attacked Hysteria. Pong, pong, pong. He unleashed countless attacks at this instant, causing Hysteria's golden body to shudder violently. Whoosh! Hysteria counterattacked, using a tentacle to whip Ling Han's fist. Wang! A devastating power rippled through the air, blasting Ling Han back. Meanwhile, Hysteria's tentacle also bounced back slightly. This exchange had ended in a draw. Gasp! After engulfing the final dimension and obtaining the power of the entire Genesis world, Hysteria's power had also grown to an unfathomable level. One had to realize that it was unable to channel the heavenly Venerable seals. It was only able to wield its raw power. Yet, it was still powerful enough to rival Ling Han, who had already increased his power 100,000-fold. Just how insanely powerful had it become? There was no dispute that it was the most powerful being in the world. Ha 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 ha! Hysteria roared with laughter. Its strength was still increasing, and the power of the Genesis world was still boundlessly gathering. This was an infinite power that made it feel as if everything was within its grasp. Chapter 3079, 3079 Fading Away, Regardless of Success or Failure. Chapter 3079, 3079 Fading Away, Regardless of Success or Failure. 3079 Fading Away, Regardless of Success or Failure. The celestial realm was destroyed, and the Genesis world was annihilated. Everything was engulfed by Hysteria, and all that remained was a boundless expanse of nothingness. Seventh-tier elites were undying. So were they all going to wander in this vast and empty void forever? Ha 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 ha! Ha 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 ha! Hysteria roared with laughter. It had waited for this day for far too long. From its past life to its present life, and after experiencing the destruction of 2 Genesis worlds, it had finally succeeded. Extermination flew over and said, "Why are you laughing like an idiot? I've already put up with you for too long." Hysteria howled as it lashed out at Extermination. Right now, it had already become the Genesis world. The longer that passed, the more powerful it would become. Before succeeding, it had still needed to rely on Extermination to hold Ling Han back. Now that it had succeeded, however, was there still any need for Extermination? Hysteria didn't need to share this success with anyone. Pong! Extermination naturally wouldn't stand there and allow Hysteria to attack her as it pleased. She moved to block its attack, yet she was immediately sent flying. She stabilized herself after flying 50,000 kilometers into the distance. There was a cold smile on her face, and she was surprisingly calm as she said, "I initially thought that you would remain composed for a while longer. At the very least, I didn't expect you to turn on your allies so quickly. Since things had already come to this, Ling Han was no longer in a hurry like before. The Genesis world had already been engulfed by Hysteria, so Hysteria was now the new Genesis world. If one entered Hysteria's body, they would then be subject to Hysteria's rules. Ling Han wanted to see what extermination's true purpose was. After doing so many unreasonable things to help Hysteria, just what was she truly after? Hysteria was also slightly puzzled. Even though its body was colossal, it had indeed been a person at the very start. It was just that this person had entered their current body using their divine sense. Afterward, they had then transformed themselves into a dimension. In any case, there was nothing wrong with Hysteria's intelligence, so it naturally realized something was off about extermination's attitude right now. Firstly, why had extermination helped it? Hysteria didn't care much about this, and it only cared about the outcome. Secondly, why was extermination completely unsurprised by its betrayal? Just what was she playing at? This was clearly its previous self, yet Hysteria couldn't help but feel extremely distant and unfamiliar with her. It felt like she was a complete stranger. So what if I've turned on you? Can you do anything about it? Hysteria replied using its divine sense as it brandished its countless tentacles. Everything is within my grasp, Extermination replied calmly. She appeared as composed as could be. Is she acting? Hysteria was extremely puzzled. She was at the 7th tier. So would she be a fool? So be it if extermination had allied with it because it had tricked her. However, this wasn't the case. Instead, it was extermination who had actively chosen to ally with it. She was definitely no fool. The problem was, it possessed the power of the entire Genesis world right now, so who could rival it? Regardless of what your plans are, they're all futile in the face of absolute power. Hysteria declared as it swung a tentacle at extermination. Only a short moment had passed, yet its power had already increased threefold. Origin destroying strike. Extermination cried as she made a tapping motion with her finger. Her movements were ethereal and beautiful. Wong. A ray of light shot into Hysteria's body, yet extermination was also sent flying by Hysteria's strike. If she had been an ordinary 7th tier elite, she would have potentially been killed by this strike. Haha, is this your trump card? Hysteria laughed. Before my absolute strength, your struggles are all in vain. Whoosh! It swung another tentacle at extermination. Extermination dodged, not facing this attack head-on. When the Genesis world of the last era was destroyed, countless souls and wills fused together. Within this, there was even the will of the Genesis world itself, extermination said. It was as if she were giving Hysteria a lesson. However, Ling Han, Lin Luo, Chong Yin, and the others were all listening carefully. It was very likely that extermination was about to reveal a huge secret. The Genesis world also has a will of its own, even though this will is extremely subtle and weak. The only information contained in this will is information regarding how the Genesis world has nurtured life, extermination explained. Of course, with life also comes death. As for me, I'm someone who managed to obtain this information, extermination said as she pointed at herself. A breathtakingly beautiful smile spread across her face. However, it's a shame that the Genesis world of the last era was destroyed, leading to most of this information being lost as well. I was only able to grasp a small portion of it. She looked at Hysteria and continued, coincidentally, the information I received was the secret codes of death. Hysteria's expression changed drastically. This expression was also reflected on its colossal body, in the sense that the color of its skin started to change rapidly and chaotically. Someone as powerful as extermination definitely wouldn't bluff. In addition, extermination continued, you truly shouldn't have transformed yourself into a dimension. You learned from the mistake of your past life, and you realized that even the destructive power of the exploding Genesis world wouldn't be able to kill you if you transformed into a dimension. However, the existence of the Genesis world naturally follows its own set of regulations. There are secret codes of life, and there are also secret codes of death. What these secret codes target are dimensions. Hysteria's tentacles started to sway again, signifying its fluctuating emotions. Extermination looked at Ling Han and said, I already told you before, a new age is about to arrive. Why don't you believe me? Ling Han's expression was cold. Extermination had seemingly tricked everyone with her schemes. She had used Wang Chuanhe to target Ling Han, and she had also set a trap for Hysteria long ago. Who exactly are you? He asked. Me, Extermination said with a faint smile. There's no hurry. It's not time to reveal this secret yet. She looked at Hysteria and continued. This is the final dimension of the Genesis world. Once it's destroyed, the door to a new world will open, allowing us to walk out of this small pond. Chong Yin and the others were all filled with excitement. It was because of this that they had chosen to ally with Extermination. Moreover, they would also obtain huge benefits when Hysteria died, and it was even possible that they could advance to the 8th tier. Absolute nonsense. Hysteria bellowed. Its divine sense boomed into the surroundings, causing tumultuous waves to crash through the minds of the 7th tier elites. It brandished its tentacles and attacked Extermination, roaring, I'll kill you first. Extermination immediately dodged its attacks. Even though she was nowhere near as powerful as Ling Han, she was also a powerful 7th tier elite just like Hysteria. Thus, she could dodge at least 90% of Hysteria's attacks. Even when she was occasionally struck, she was more than powerful enough to withstand the attacks. Hysteria, since you've transformed into a dimension, you have no option but to abide by the rules that dictate dimensions. This won't change even though you've already engulfed all of the other dimensions. And when we look at the life cycle of dimensions, it's only reasonable that they eventually face destruction. Hysteria continued to ferociously attack her, yet before long, its body quickly started to become unstable. Rays of light started to bounce around inside its body, and it was as if they all yearned to shoot out. Perhaps Extermination's words were true? Perhaps Hysteria was genuinely about to be destroyed? This was truly inconceivable. After engulfing the entire Genesis world, Hysteria should have been charging toward the peak of its life. Yet, it was at this exact moment that it passed its zenith and started to plummet. 1, 2, 3, 4. Extermination continued to count, and when she reached 59, Hysteria finally lost its power to attack. Countless rays of light crashed around inside it, causing its colossal golden body to shudder violently. No, I'm the most powerful and mighty being in this world. I've engulfed the entire Genesis world, so I'm now going to leap out of this expanse of heaven and earth. Hysteria roared. Its divine sense fluctuated through the void. Lin Luo and the others naturally saw everything. They were filled with astonishment. Was Extermination going to turn around and prove her innocence now? Hysteria's aura became increasingly unstable. At the same time, its body also started to expand. It was like a balloon that had been filled with too much air, about to explode at any moment. Chapter 3080, 3080, Continually Changing Situation. Chapter 3080, 3080, Continually Changing Situation. 3080, Continually Changing Situation. Everyone was deeply astonished, including Ling Han. This turn of events was truly unexpected. Hysteria had just reached the peak of its life, yet it had quickly fallen to rock bottom in the very next instant. Was it done for? Was it about to die? Extermination. Just who in the world are you? Hysteria roared using its divine sense. It discovered the perilous situation of its body, and it realized that it might explode at any moment. It was using its full strength to stabilize its body, yet it was as if that destructive power were the ultimate will of heaven and earth. This was a will that didn't heed his command. Extermination clasped her hands behind her back and explained calmly, with life comes inevitable death. Separation begets union, and union begets separation. Do you know? Every world and every dimension has an upper limit regarding how much power it can contain. After engulfing so many realms, the power that you've absorbed has already surpassed this limit. So, even if I hadn't targeted you, you would have still struggled to escape this fate of destruction. I simply accelerated the process. Hysteria was boiling with rage. If extermination hadn't used that so-called origin-destroying strike, would it have been forced into this perilous state? If it were given enough time, it could have torn open the void using its absolute strength and jumped out of this small and restrictive pond. Of course, Hysteria naturally didn't know what lay beyond the void. Was it a more spectacular world, or was it an ice-cold and desolate land of nothingness? Regardless, as long as it left this world, it would no longer have to suffer the restriction of this heaven and earth. Now, however, was everything going to be destroyed by its past self? Why? 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 Everyone, are you not going to hurry up and attack? We can't allow it to unleash a dying attack and cause immense damage. Extermination said as she looked at Ling Han and the others. To be more precise, she was specifically talking to Ling Han. After all, no one else could cause any damage to Hysteria, even though it was already in such dire straits. Not only that, but a casual counterattack from Hysteria could easily kill even 7th-tier elites. The death of Extermination and Yellow Sand in the last era was proof of this fact. The might of the Genesis world was unstoppable, and the invincibility of 7th-tier elites was not absolute. Thus, only Ling Han was powerful enough to attack it. Ling Han frowned upon hearing this. Everything was progressing according to Extermination's plans. Not long ago, she had obstructed Ling Han and given Hysteria the opportunity to engulf all of the dimensions. Now, however, she was screwing Hysteria over and pushing it to the brink of destruction. Just what was she playing at? Ling Han felt an instinctive urge to refuse her proposal. However, Hysteria had already become their greatest threat, so it was necessary that they eliminate it as soon as possible. If it were killed now, they still had an opportunity to rebuild the Genesis world. However, Extermination was definitely scheming something else. She definitely wasn't trying to help them. If she had truly been acting in the best interest of the Genesis world, then she would have allied with Ling Han a long time ago. With Ling Han's power at that time, they could have easily suppressed Hysteria and stopped it from advancing. Once Ling Han advanced to the 7th tier, they could have then killed Hysteria with relative ease. Yet, things had come to this instead. That being the case, Extermination's aim was definitely more than just killing Hysteria. In any case, she had repeatedly mentioned a new age and jumping out of this small pond. Thus, killing Hysteria was most likely only a single aspect of her plans. The problem was, what if Extermination knew that Ling Han would think like this? Thus, she was doing the opposite of what she meant, and her true intention was actually for Ling Han not to attack. Ling Han felt slightly hesitant. There was an information asymmetry between them, so he could only rely on guessing. He looked at Extermination, and Extermination simply smiled faintly at him. She was stunningly beautiful, and it was as if everything was within her grasp. Ling Han immediately made up his mind. Whoosh! He charged forward and unleashed a furious punch at Hysteria. The reason for this was simple. If Extermination didn't block his attack, then that would mean that she truly wanted him to attack Hysteria. If that were the case, then he would retract his attack straight away. If the inverse were true, however, and Extermination stepped forward to block him, then it would prove that she was uttering a load of trash. His attack was as quick as lightning. Extermination didn't stop him, yet Ling Han didn't retract his attack either. Just as Ling Han's fist was about to strike Hysteria, whoosh! Extermination finally made her move. She immediately dashed beside Hysteria and unleashed a palm strike at Ling Han. The three of them were almost standing in a straight line, with Hysteria in the middle. Moreover, Extermination was closer to Hysteria, so even though she had launched her attack later, it was her attack that landed first. Pong! Extermination was immediately sent flying by the shock wave, with her face as white as a sheet. Even as strong as Extermination was, she still couldn't withstand the power of Ling Han's devastating attack. She would definitely be at a disadvantage if she faced his attacks head-on. Surprisingly, however, Ling Han didn't attack her or Hysteria again. There was surprise in Extermination's beautiful eyes as she stood in the distance. You're very good at acting. You purposely stepped forward just then, and you acted as if you wanted to stop me at all costs, Ling Han said calmly. However, since you've set up such a scenario, you naturally would have considered the fact that I would guess your intentions and use this method to probe you. So, I speculated that you've set up a scheme within a scheme. This current scenario is still a facade, something you're using to cover up your true intentions. Extermination's expression finally changed. Wah! She vomited a mouthful of blood, which immediately combusted upon hitting the ground, turning into a pile of ashes. She stared at Ling Han for a long time, eventually saying, "Who would have thought that you could make such a calm judgment in such a short amount of time and in the face of such a complicated situation?" Ling Han shook his head and said, "I was simply taking a gamble." Extermination suddenly roared with laughter and said, "Very well. Then you've gambled correctly. However, after planning and preparing for so many years, is this something that you can interfere with?" She recited some chant, and her beautiful face instantly became even paler. She spat out another mouthful of blood, and this again combusted into ashes just like before. She then pointed at Hysteria from a distance. Whoosh! A burst of black air rushed at Hysteria. This was definitely nothing good. Ling Han humphed coldly and swung a fist at the burst of black air. Meanwhile, Lin Luo and the others all wore strange expressions. The situation was changing far too quickly. In the beginning, it had been them struggling and trying to attack Hysteria, while Extermination was the one doing everything she could to stop them. Now, however, the situation was the complete opposite. It was Extermination who was trying to attack Hysteria, and it was Ling Han who was trying to stop her and protect Hysteria. This situation was far too strange. Ling Han's punch slammed into the burst of black air. However, his fist eerily passed through the black air, and it was as if the black air didn't exist at all. Whoosh! The black air entered Hysteria's body and didn't exit again. Ling Han turned around to observe the situation with a frown. What was this black air? It was ineffective against him, yet it was incredibly destructive toward Hysteria. Hysteria's aura became increasingly unstable after being infiltrated by the black air, and it was as if it were about to explode at any moment. This is another secret code of death that I obtained from the Genesis world's Will of the Last Era, Extermination explained calmly. However, unleashing this attack had placed a huge burden on her, and she immediately spat out another mouthful of blood. Her aura also plummeted drastically. This attack is only effective against dimensions, so it's impossible for you to stop it. Ling Han chuckled coldly, saying, "With your current situation, how many more times can you unleash such an attack?" He charged at Extermination, not giving her another opportunity to attack. Extermination dodged, not willing to face Ling Han head-on. Instead, she found opportunities to continually attack Hysteria. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. She attacked Hysteria again and again. Even though the burden on her was so immense that she wanted to vomit her internal organs, she still persisted and continued to attack. She attacked relentlessly, and Hysteria was finally unable to withstand this pressure any longer. Its colossal body undulated like water, and all of a sudden, a column of blindingly bright light erupted from its body. Chapter 3081, 3081 Self-Destruction of Hysteria. Chapter 3081, 3081 Self-Destruction of Hysteria. 3081 Self-Destruction of Hysteria. Hysteria was self-destructing. A column of blindingly brilliant light soared into the air, forcing even Ling Han to shut his eyes lest he be blinded. In the next instant, however, he immediately started to move. He flew toward Lin Luo and the others, directly grabbing them and putting them under his protection. Boom! Behind him, a devastating shock wave roared over, much like a tsunami wave crashing toward a shore. He was directly sent flying. Ling Han defended with his full strength, with his powers of dimension from tens of millions of dimensions intertwining into a web that blocked the petrifying shock wave behind him. Hysteria's self-destruction had ignited a catastrophic explosion. The entire Genesis world had been engulfed by Hysteria, So upon self-destructing, this was equivalent to the entire Genesis world being ignited at once. Moreover, this was a Genesis world that had been compressed into a single dimension. Thus, the scale of the explosion was naturally even more devastating. It was clear that Ling Han couldn't withstand such a powerful explosion. Instead, he could only go with the flow and choose to be sent flying by the overwhelming shock waves of the explosion. If he dared to resist, he would be severely wounded even if he weren't killed. At the same time, the majority of people in the dimensions inside him would also be killed. Rumble. All that remained in the void was a series of deafening explosions and rumbles. As the explosive shock waves ripped through the void, even the void storms were comprehensively reduced to nothingness. This was no longer a matter of how far Ling Han was sent flying. Instead, it was a matter of how long Ling Han was carried by this explosive shock wave from Hysteria's self-destruction. A whopping 100 million years. Who could have imagined this? The humongous explosion caused by Hysteria's self-destruction had lasted an insane 100 million years. Only after all these years did the energy windstorm finally start to subside. Ling Han stood still and unclenched his hands, releasing Lin Luo and the others. "We need to go back," Ling Han said. With a stomp of his foot, a giant pair of wings unfurled behind him. It was created by a combination of fundamental power and powers of dimension. With a flap of his wings, his speed immediately reached an incredible level, rapidly bringing him back to the location where Hysteria had self-destructed. Lin Luo and the others quickly followed after him. Perhaps there could exist huge gulfs between the battle prowess of different 7th-tier elites. However, their speed was something that wouldn't differ by much. Ling Han was indeed slightly quicker than them, but only by a small margin. Another 100 million years passed, and Ling Han and the others finally arrived back at their original location. Following Hysteria's self-destruction, even the energy windstorms in the void were reduced to nothingness. However, the void was far too large, so it was most likely only a matter of time before the storms of energy from other locations slowly permeated this area again. At that time, everything would return to normal. Many years into the future, perhaps a new Genesis world would be born again. Death was the conclusion of life, yet death itself was not an absolute conclusion. Instead, it represented a new beginning. Where Hysteria had stood before, there was surprisingly a fuzzy door. Looking at this door, it was as if they could vaguely see the world that lay behind it. In terms of what actually existed in this world, however, they were at a complete loss. Was this the so-called door that would lead them out of this small pond? Above this door, there also hovered a golden orb that was spinning and occasionally releasing a beam of light that illuminated the void. Whoosh! Extermination, Chong Yin, and the others also flew over. Excitement and anticipation appeared on their faces when they saw the fuzzy door and the golden orb above it. Were these the things that they were after? Whoosh! Another figure flew over from some other direction. Ling Han turned around, and he couldn't help but feel astonished. This wasn't a person, but instead a golden octopus. It was approximately 9 meters long, and its 8 tentacles swayed under its body. Hysteria? This was indeed Hysteria, even though his body was countless times smaller than before. It actually hadn't died. Extermination! The octopus bellowed as it glowered at extermination. Its tentacles flicked through the air, and it appeared as furious as could be. Extermination swept her gaze over it and said, "Oh, so you also had a hidden backup plan. You hid your true core inside your colossal body, so even after it was destroyed, you were still able to manifest your true core and stay alive." After being destroyed by the Genesis world of the last era, how could I not have a backup plan? Hysteria humphed coldly. Anyway, it's also good that you didn't die. Personally killing you will give me a great sense of achievement. Extermination said. She suddenly reached over, with her target being the golden orb above the fuzzy door. In your dreams, Ling Han shouted as he directly charged over, throwing a fist at the same time. After going through all this trouble, Extermination's true aim was most likely this golden orb, right? He definitely couldn't let her succeed. Whoosh! Hysteria also moved, brandishing its tentacles as it charged over. Pong, pong, pong. The three elites became engaged in an intense battle. Hysteria had definitely been the most powerful of the three before, yet its dimensional-level self-destruction had naturally changed the situation. Even though its true core wasn't destroyed, the new body that it had manifested was 1,000,000 times weaker than before. In terms of raw power, it was even weaker than extermination now. On the flip side, however, it was no longer a dimension. What did this signify? This signified that it could use heavenly venerable seals. Wang. Only a single symbol lit up on its body, yet this symbol alone was able to increase its power by countless folds. As it lashed out with its tentacles, it was surprisingly able to unleash a battle prowess equivalent to 1/10 of its prime. Just like Ling Han, it had also mastered all of the heavenly venerable seals. This was easily understandable. Just how long had it lived for? And just what kind of existence was it? Would it have been difficult to deduce all of the heavenly venerable seals? However, it was still Ling Han who had the upper hand. His power was the greatest, so neither Hysteria nor Extermination was able to rival his powerful punches. Pong pong. The two ultimate elites were continuously sent flying by him. Right now, there was no one who could rival Ling Han. He was the undisputed #1 elite in the world. After scheming for so long, was Extermination truly going to end up empty-handed? Were all her efforts truly to no avail? Extermination unleashed a long cry before dashing toward the golden orb. Not so fast, Ling Han said coldly. He dashed over and threw a punch. Pong! Extermination was surprisingly smashed into pieces. Ling Han was astonished. Even though his punches were powerful, they shouldn't have been powerful enough to shatter her. After all, that was Extermination. Sure enough, Extermination's shattered body continued to dash toward the fuzzy door. With the golden orb at the center, her shattered body then started to knit back together. Haha, the secret of the world is mine, she laughed, with her raven hair fluttering in the wind. Extermination. Chong Yin and the others howled. They were all filled with raging fury. Before allying with her, it had been agreed that they would also obtain a portion of this treasure. This was a crucial treasure that would decide whether they could advance to the 8th tier or not. Did you people really think that I would honor my promises and Dao oaths? Extermination asked. She roared with laughter and continued smugly, "Bunch of fools. If I advance to the 8th tier and jump out of this world, will the so-called Dao oath still be able to constrain me?" Extermination was truly a shrewd and scheming person. She screwed people over no matter who they were. Ling Han charged over and roared, "If Dao oaths can't constrain you, then let me blast you into oblivion." He threw a furious punch at Extermination. The two of them became locked in a fierce battle again. However, after swallowing that golden orb, Extermination's power surprisingly started to rise explosively in an exponential manner. Boundless energy rolled through the void, funneling into Extermination's body. Haha, once I absorb the power of this entire void, I'll obtain the power to shatter that door and enter a new world. Extermination laughed heartily, with a smug expression on her face. Everything was under her control, from the beginning to the end. Chapter 3082, Dividing the Energy. Chapter 3082, Dividing the Energy. 3082, Dividing the Energy. Huh. Ling Han was astonished. He discovered that even though most of the energy was funneling into Extermination, there was also quite a noticeable amount of energy flowing into him. The 6th type of fundamental power grew stronger and stronger in his body, and this allowed him to absorb the surrounding energy quicker and quicker. At the same time, it was as if all of the dimensions in his body had been activated, and they were filled with vigor as they voraciously absorbed the fundamental power and charged toward the transcendent level. Secret codes of life. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. After engulfing the entire Genesis world, Hysteria had naturally formed new secret codes of life as well. These were secret codes that contained the core secret of the Genesis world. No wonder Hysteria had become so powerful before. However, Extermination's actions had caused it to self-destruct, which resulted in these core secrets of the world being exposed as well. Now, Extermination had managed to obtain these complete secret codes of life, so it was only natural that her power increased explosively. Why hadn't Ling Han managed to encounter such a situation? Ling Han pondered for a moment before coming to a sudden realization. He had only been at the 6th tier before, so due to the limit of his cultivation, he hadn't been able to elevate his dimensions at a quick speed. Of course, his speed had already been incredible to begin with. He had cultivated all of his dimensions to the high level in just 10 billion years. Now that he had advanced to the 7th tier and raised his upper limit, he was naturally able to extract fundamental power at an even quicker speed. Moreover, as his cultivation grew and stabilized, this speed would also continue to increase. In addition to this, the existence of the Genesis world before had also introduced some form of restriction and equilibrium. This had definitely affected Ling Han's speed as well. However, the situation was completely different now. The Genesis world was no more, and the vast energy in the void all funneled toward Ling Han and Extermination. "That's mine," Hysteria roared as it charged over. It had also managed to catch a glimpse of the secret codes of life at that time. Otherwise, it couldn't have become so powerful. Thus, it was also able to absorb some of the surging energy. Anyhow, the golden orb wasn't simply an orb that contained the secret codes of life. At the same time, it was also something that could gather fundamental power together. Otherwise, one wouldn't be able to absorb the secret codes of life so quickly even if they obtained it. Ling Han, Extermination, and Hysteria battled against each other as they fought to absorb this energy. Chong Yin and the others also wanted to grab a slice of this energy. However, to say nothing of the fact that they were too weak, they would be sent flying with a single punch. They wouldn't be able to absorb this energy even if they were powerful enough. After all, without grasping the secret codes of life, would they have the right to absorb this energy? All they could do was stand aside and watch on. However, this was something that pertained to whether they could reach the 8th tier or not. This huge opportunity was sitting right there in front of them, yet they were powerless to do anything but stand there and watch. This pained them so much that the rims of their eyes were about to crack. Meanwhile, Lin Luo and the others weren't worried about this fact. Instead, they frowned slightly as they worried about which of the 3 ultimate elites would eventually emerge victorious. If it wasn't Ling Han, then the situation would become as dire as could be. Boom! Waves of energy crashed through the void. The void was non-sentient, nor did it have a will. It simply operated within the boundaries of some regulation. In the view of the void, the destruction of the Genesis world simply meant that it needed to create a new one. Thus, boundless energy surged over, creating an environment that could birth a new world. What lay at the center of this surging energy was none other than the golden orb. This was the secret code of the Genesis world. This energy was far too powerful and immense, so much so that there was more than enough to satisfy Ling Han, Extermination, and Hysteria. In fact, there was so much energy that the 3 of them were almost about to explode under the pressure. To destroy a world required magnificent power. In the same way, to create a world also required magnificent power. The 3 beings had no option but to stop, focusing their full effort on refining the terrifying amount of energy instead. Otherwise, they would explode under the titanic pressure. The 3 of them sat down, absorbing the boundless energy and transforming it into their own. Inside Ling Han's body, the 6th type of fundamental power quickly reached a satiated state. He had advanced to the peak stage of the 7th tier. His cultivation speed was simply unfathomable. However, this was largely because the current situation was far too unique. After all, how many times would the Genesis world be destroyed and recreated? After reaching the peak stage of the 7th tier, the 6 fundamental powers inside him also reached a state of perfect equilibrium. Upon channeling them, Ling Han could create a terrifying absorption power. The dimensions inside Ling Han continued to grow. If it were he who had obtained the golden orb, the void would have potentially stopped funneling energy over once he raised one or several of his dimensions to the transcendent level. This was because there were far too many dimensions inside him. By just elevating their levels a little, he could quickly give birth to a brand new Genesis world. Now, however, the golden orb was inside Extermination's body. Even though she had obtained the secret codes of life, allowing her to manifest new dimensions, there were far too few dimensions inside her to begin with. Moreover, the speed of manifesting new dimensions would definitely be very slow. When Extermination cultivated all of her dimensions to the transcendent level, she had no option but to stop her extraction of the boundless energy. She needed to create some new dimensions first. Only after that could she continue to absorb energy to cultivate them. Since this was the case, how could she compete with Ling Han in terms of speed? This issue affected Hysteria even more severely. There were no dimensions inside its body, or perhaps there were only one or two, so it quickly reached a state of fullness. It was forced to retreat lest it exploded into pieces again. It brandished its 8 tentacles, and it was filled with jealousy and fury. It was clearly it that had engulfed the Genesis world, and it was clearly it that had created this great opportunity. Yet, it was being forced to back down so quickly? How could it tolerate this? Hysteria swung its tentacles at Ling Han and Extermination. However, the void was filled with surging energy so concentrated that it was almost tangible. As a result, Hysteria's attacks failed to hit its targets. Not only that, but its tentacles were also reflected back by the dense energy. Hysteria unleashed several more attacks to vent its fury, yet these were all to no avail. It could only give up and turn its attention to the doorway of light instead. Beyond this was a new world. Once it left this void, left this small pond, what awaited it would be great opportunities that were far superior to the measly benefits in this small place. And after it left, it would turn around to shatter this doorway of light. You people can stay in this small pond and rot to death. It charged forward, attempting to squeeze into the doorway of light. However, it immediately discovered that it couldn't fit into the doorway no matter what. It was as if the doorway were supremely tough, and Hysteria couldn't squeeze itself through it no matter how hard it tried. It could only advance a single inch and no further. It couldn't get out at all. Hysteria shrunk itself down, all the way until it only measured 1 inch in height. It then charged at the doorway of light again. However, now that its body was smaller, the distance that it could travel through the doorway also became lesser. It still couldn't exit. Arg! It bellowed in fury. So be it if it couldn't obtain the huge opportunity presented by the boundless energy, yet it couldn't even leave through this door now. I can't leave? Then I'll destroy you. Hysteria unleashed an attack at the doorway of light. It wouldn't be so naive as to think that Ling Han or Extermination would be generous enough to take it with them when they left. So, since it had to stay trapped in this place and rot to death, then it would force the two of them to suffer the same fate as well. It frenziedly attacked the doorway of light, yet the doorway appeared to be surprisingly sturdy as it remained completely unharmed. No, it couldn't be described as sturdy. Instead, it wasn't enduring any force at all. Hysteria attacked the doorway for several days, yet its efforts were all in vain. It attempted to charge through the doorway again. However, it discovered that even the supremely tough nature of the doorway seemed to have disappeared. Right now, it was as if the doorway were nothing more than a projection, an intangible projection that didn't exist at all. Since it didn't exist, how could Hysteria destroy it or pass through it? Hysteria went wild with rage. It turned its attention to Lin Luo, Chong Yin, and the others. Since this was the case, then it would kill these people first. Chapter 3083, 3083 Becoming Hostile. Chapter 3083, 3083 Becoming Hostile. 3083 Becoming Hostile. Ling Han absorbed energy as if his life depended on it, and new dimensions were born one after another inside his body. While this happened, the older dimensions also continued to grow more powerful, advancing toward the transcendent level. It was unknown how long had passed, but his body suddenly shuddered at some moment, after which a burst of power surged through him. One of his dimensions had reached the transcendent level. Immediately afterward, a second dimension reached the transcendent level, and then a third, a fourth, and so on. The dimensions inside him continued to advance to the transcendent level. Time continued to fly past. Right now, the number of dimensions inside Ling Han had already gone from over 400,000 to over 1 million. Moreover, over half of them had already reached the transcendent level. There were still more dimensions being born, and there were still more dimensions advancing to the transcendent level. Ling Han truly didn't dare to imagine just how powerful he was now. One transcendent dimension alone was already equivalent to at least 10 ultimate elites at the peak stage of the 7th tier. Right now, he was about to reach a whopping 1 million transcendent dimensions in his body. Just how devastating would his power be? It would be far superior to the destroyed Genesis world. Ling Han was slightly surprised. He discovered that the flow of energy had slowed down. It wasn't that he was losing to extermination and absorbing less energy than her, but rather, less energy was being provided to them by the void. Thus, the flow of energy naturally slowed down. Ling Han pondered this for a moment before coming to a sudden realization. He and extermination had exhausted the energy in the void. However, the void was boundless, so how could it be exhausted? They had never been to the edges of the void, but since it could be regarded as a small pond, this implied that there was definitely a boundary. It was only because the void was far too large compared to Ling Han and the others that they had never been able to reach this boundary. In any case, just how much energy had Ling Han and extermination absorbed? Ling Han had cultivated 1 million realms to the transcendent level. This was absolutely terrifying. Extermination was inferior to Ling Han, yet she had probably been able to cultivate at least 100,000 dimensions to the transcendent level as well. The two of them had actually exhausted the void. It wasn't long before the last wisp of energy also disappeared. At this moment, the void had truly become void. Not even a sliver of energy remained. What? In the distance, the brawling Hysteria, Lin Luo, Chong Yin, and the others had no option but to stop. They were unable to extract any more energy from the void to replenish what they were expending. In fact, they couldn't even sense the fundamental particles anymore. How could they not be stunned? Once they used up all of their energy, they would also slowly weaken, with their battle prowess falling from the 7th tier bit by bit, all the way until they became mere mortals. This caused them to feel deep astonishment and fear. Ha 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 ha! Extermination roared with laughter, and her raven hair billowed in the void. There were over 100,000 transcendent dimensions in her body, and this resulted in her power growing hundreds of millions-fold compared to before. After planning and scheming for so long, she had finally achieved her goal. Extermination! Hysteria roared. Its previous self had stolen its great opportunity from right under its nose. This caused it to boil with fury. Just who do you think you are? Extermination said as she launched a palm strike at Hysteria. Hysteria brandished a tentacle to block this attack, yet its tentacle was immediately severed, causing golden blood to spray through the air. This released a small amount of energy back into the desolate void. Pathetically weak, Extermination said coldly. Everyone inhaled sharply. Hysteria had once been invincible, yet it was now this fragile and weak. Extermination looked at Chong Yin and the other ultimate elites from the Genesis world of the last era. An eerie smile appeared on her face, and she said, "I'm so sorry that I've disappointed you people. However, I had no other option. None of you have grasped the secret codes of life, so how can you possibly advance to the 8th tier? However, I can still bring you people out of this place and lead you into a new world. Perhaps this new world is infinitely large, and perhaps the great opportunities in our current world are nothing compared to what lies in this new world." Even though Chong Yin and the 4 others were extremely pissed off by her words, the only thing they could do right now was to suppress their anger and accept this reality. Since it was impossible for them to reach the 8th tier, then only one other path remained open to them. That was to leave this place. In fact, they had also tried to enter the doorway of light just then, yet they had suffered the exact same fate as Hysteria. It was as if the doorway didn't exist at all. Anyhow, once they left and entered that larger world, perhaps they would quickly find an opportunity to advance to the 8th tier. They would continue to tolerate extermination for the moment. Chong Yin and the others flew toward extermination, all of them eagerly looking forward to a bright and beautiful future. Ling Han didn't stop them. He wasn't in a hurry. Extermination had indeed become countless times more powerful than before. However, had he not? He could only be more powerful than her. Everything was within his grasp. Chong Yin and the 4 others, as well as Golden Silk Moth and 10,000 Shadows, all flew toward extermination. A glorious future awaited them. Extremely eager, aren't you? Extermination said with an eerie smile. Do you want to see the world that lies beyond this small pond? Expressions of yearning appeared on the faces of Chong Yin and the others. They had already reached the end of their cultivation path, and it was impossible for them to take another step further. The only way they could advance was by jumping out of this heaven and earth. Curiosity was a trait shared by everyone. This was especially the case for powerful beings like them, and they were even more eager to see what lay beyond their own heaven and earth. And the answer to this question was about to be revealed. Pooh! A streak of blood squirted into the air. Something unexpected happened. Extermination suddenly lashed out, stabbing her hand into Chong Yin's back and thrusting it forward so that it exited from his chest. Clasped in her slender hand was a beating heart. Arg! Chong Yin wailed in agony. What did it matter that he was a 7th-tier ultimate elite? Standing before extermination, his once invincible physique was now as fragile as paper. It was completely unable to resist her attack. Extermination withdrew her hand, causing Chong Yin to instantly fall forward into the void. His face was as white as a sheet. 7th-tier elites were undying, and they could stay alive even if their hearts were destroyed. However, it was also because of this that each part of their body was extremely precious. After losing their heart, it would take them heaven knew how long to grow a new one. Why had extermination suddenly attacked him? Was she killing her meritorious subordinates now? She no longer had a need for them, so she was going to exterminate them now? Shatter Mountains, Golden Silk Moth, and the others hurriedly shot back in retreat, their eyes filled with shock and terror as they looked at extermination. Once rulers of the world, these 7th-tier elites were now no longer the high and mighty beings of the past. Standing before Ling Han and extermination, they were so weak that they were barely worth a mention. Meanwhile, the once peerless Hysteria could only be regarded as a 2nd-tier force. Hysteria had also tried to kill Chong Yin, Lin Luo, and the others just then, but it had only been able to suppress them and not kill them. In comparison, it was abundantly clear that extermination and Ling Han were now countless times more powerful than it. Why? Chong Yin howled in rage. Losing his heart was a grave wound that would require tens of billions of years to recover from. However, the Genesis world had already been destroyed, and the energy in the void had already been exhausted. So, how could he possibly recover? A cruel smile spread across extermination's face. She lashed out again, and the sound of shattering bones sounded again and again. Shatter Mountains, Big Dipper, and the 2 other ultimate elites from the Genesis world of the last era all suffered harrowing fates. Their arms and legs were crushed, and their hearts and lungs were also plucked. Was she torturing them? Lin Luo and the others all shook their heads. No matter how they looked at it, it seemed as if extermination was exacting revenge on them for some personal grievance. Extermination wasn't truly extermination. Instead, this person had simply taken control of this body. So, just who in the world was she? What kind of grudges did she hold against Chong Yin and the others? Are you people curious about who I really am? Extermination asked with a cold smile. Chapter 3084, 3084 True Identity. Chapter 3084, 3084 True Identity. 3084 True Identity. Was the truth finally about to be revealed? What was extermination's true identity? Just who in the world was she? Pung! Extermination launched a palm strike, and Chong Yan's left arm was instantly transformed into a cloud of blood. Chong Yan howled in agony. However, more than the pain, he felt an unspeakable sense of terror. The only thing that remained in this heaven and earth was void nothingness. There was not an inkling of energy to be extracted. In other words, it would be impossible for him to recover from these grave wounds. At the same time, it would be impossible for him to regenerate any cultivation that he lost. How could he not feel utter despair? Why was extermination attacking him with such viciousness? Just how had he offended her to deserve such a wretched fate? The hope for a glorious future sits right here in front of you, yet I'm going to crush your dreams just like this. How does this feel? Extermination laughed. She wasn't targeting Chong Yan alone, and she was also targeting Big Dipper, Shatter Mountains, and the others. Their limbs and bodies had all been brutally mutilated by her. Ling Han didn't stop her. Chong Yan and the others had asked for this themselves. They had insisted on siding with a vicious monster. Moreover, Ling Han also wanted to find out Extermination's true identity. Thus, he would allow her to act smugly for the moment. Do you feel despair? Do you feel regret? Extermination sneered and taunted them each time she attacked them. Her words were dripping with venom, and Chong Yan and the others truly wanted to cry. They had believed her Tao oath, and they had thought that Extermination was truly going to cooperate with them. They hadn't imagined that Extermination would turn hostile at the very last moment. They were unwilling to accept this fate. However, what could they do now? At that time, you people lied to me and tricked me into blocking Extermination. You promised me that you would only unleash that attack after I retreated to a safe distance. Yet, what did you people do? Extermination said coldly. Her voice was filled with resentment. What? Chong Yan and the others were stunned, so much so that even their heads went numb. A name, a figure, suddenly flashed across their minds. They were filled with sheer disbelief. Why you're Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand. What? Extermination's true identity is actually Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand? How is this possible? Didn't Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand die when the Genesis world of the last era was destroyed? Back then, Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand had held Extermination back, while Chong Yan and the others had detonated the Genesis world and unleashed an ultimate attack. Extermination had been blasted into pieces, and Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand's divine sense had also been obliterated. Only an empty shell of his body had remained. Now, however, they were being told that Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand was actually still alive, and he had actually taken over Extermination's body. This was astounding. This was inconceivable. That's right. Do you people finally remember now? Extermination said as she roared with laughter. Her expression appeared especially sinister at this moment. Pa! She threw another palm strike, instantly crushing Chong Yan's head. Oh, I'm truly sorry. I accidentally used too much force. Ah, you're dead? She said as she cocked her head and looked at Chong Yan's lifeless body. Her strike had obliterated Chong Yan's head and destroyed his mind. He was naturally as dead as could be. 7th-tier elites being indestructible and undying was now a fact of the past. There was no such thing as being indestructible and undying anymore. Ling Han, Lin Luo, and the others all sighed in emotion. As it turned out, Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand hadn't sacrificed himself willingly. Instead, he had been tricked by the others. No wonder the current Extermination was so cruel and resentful. Extermination turned around to look at Shatter Mountains and the others. A menacing smile appeared on her face, and she said, however, you people would have never imagined this, huh? When the Genesis world was destroyed, all of the souls were fused together, including mine. Even though most of my soul was destroyed, a small sliver of it was fortunate enough to remain intact. Countless souls fused together, allowing my soul to recover. In fact, my soul became even more powerful than before. However, it was a shame that I was nothing more than a soul. I was like rootless duckweed. After countless years, I did indeed manage to find my own body. At that time, I could have chosen to become Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand again. Extermination paused for a moment and swept her gaze over Shatter Mountains and the others. Her voice dripped with bitter resentment as she continued, "However, choosing to become Yellow Sand would mean that my strength would remain the same as before. If that were the case, then how could I repay your kindness?" So, I found Extermination's body and used the remnant power of the Genesis world to repair it. Do you know how long I spent? 3,000 epochs. Don't be surprised. Even though the history of this Genesis world isn't that long, there was a gap of more than 2,000 epochs between this Genesis world and the previous Genesis world. Why was I able to persist? It was because of my resentment toward you people. I was unwilling to accept my fate. I wanted to seek revenge. I repaired Extermination's body and became its host. However, far too long had passed already. Moreover, the old Genesis world had already lost all of its life force. Without a special trigger, I was also unable to revive. It was at this moment that I discovered that not only had I lived, but Extermination had also lived. It had transformed into Hysteria. So, I activated the power of the Genesis world of the last era and unleashed waves of energy to draw those fools over. I used them to reactivate that broken world. If I hadn't done this, then I would have slumbered in the void forever. As for what happened afterward, I'm sure that I don't need to explain. All of you already know. The funniest thing is, before your minds fell into a slumber, I imprinted a mark of life on them and purposely revealed that there was a huge secret hidden in Feng Wooding's body. You were convinced that he could lead you to the world's core and help you advance to the 8th tier. Absolutely hilarious. I didn't give this much thought at that time, because I didn't think that I would be able to live again. I simply wanted to play a sick joke on you people. Just how disappointed would you feel after finding out that it was all a lie? To be tricked by someone who had died countless years ago. Even if I had been dead, I would have still laughed in my grave. However, I still prefer the current situation. What do you people say? Extermination finally stopped speaking. There was a complicated look of satisfaction on her face as she looked at Shatter Mountains and the others. Once the truth was revealed, everything suddenly became understandable and simple. The current Extermination was Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand, the person who had been screwed over by them in the past. Thus, she was filled with bitter resentment and a thirst for revenge. Simply killing Chong Yin and the others was already unable to satiate her thirst for revenge. Thus, she had meticulously formulated and executed a plan, extending her lie that pertained to the world's core. She had convinced Chong Yin and the others that they could eventually advance to the 8th tier. It was also because of this that they had willingly joined her side. In reality, Chong Yin and the others had indeed provided her with a lot of help. Otherwise, Hysteria wouldn't have been able to engulf the entire Genesis world so quickly. You people don't need to dream about entering the new world, nor do you need to dream about advancing to the 8th tier. Extermination said calmly. All right, you people already know the truth now, so I assume you can die in peace. Yellow Sand, you're truly vicious, and you're truly able to endure hardship. Shatter Mountains spat through gritted teeth. In order to exact revenge, Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand had even been willing to enter the body of a woman. Just this alone was already astonishing enough. Not only that, but she had never revealed an iota of resentment or hatred toward her 5 mortal enemies. Either she had appeared normal the entire time. Her ability to conceal her true emotions was truly terrifying. After some further thought, however, this also made sense. She had already suffered through 3,000 epochs by herself, so what else was there that she couldn't endure? Die! Extermination roared as she unleashed an attack at Shatter Mountains and the others. Pong! There was a tremendous shake, and a look of astonishment spread across Extermination's breathtakingly beautiful face. Her strike had been blocked by Ling Han. Chapter 3085, 3085 Regret or No Regret. Chapter 3085, 3085 Regret or No Regret. 3085 Regret or No Regret. Ling Han actually made a move and stopped Extermination from committing murder. If Extermination wanted to kill Lin Luo and the others, then it was naturally not strange for Ling Han to make a move. But why did he want to save Shatter Mountains and the others? This scene was truly confusing and inconceivable. "You dare to stop me?" Extermination said balefully, flames flickering in her eyes. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "I'm going to kill these 4 people with my own hands. I'm already quite displeased that you have killed one of them, and you still want to do it again?" Extermination was furious. Her black hair stood on ends. She had hated Chong Yin and the others for as long as 3,000 epochs. What kind of deep hatred was this? Now that her cultivation had reached the peak, and she had tricked Chong Yin's group of 5 miserably, the climax was naturally to kill all 5 of them one by one at this moment and obtain a perfect revenge. But she was stopped by someone after killing only Chong Yin. She was extremely displeased and furious. "Since that's the case, I'll kill you first," Extermination shouted and charged towards Ling Han. Ling Han attacked and exchanged blows with Extermination. Pong, pong, pong. The intense battle started again. Currently, the strength of these 2 persons had already reached a level that even those at the peak of the 7th tier could not hope to catch up to. A single ripple of energy could not only send 7th tiers flying, but also cause them to vomit blood endlessly. Even Hysteria couldn't withstand it and had no choice but to retreat under the surging energy waves. However, it was too powerful, and the energy waves alone couldn't injure it. "You're actually this strong as well?" Extermination was shocked. She had originally thought that after absorbing all the energy in the void, she would be able to crush any existence. She did not expect that Ling Han was actually not any weaker than her. How is this possible? It had to be known that only after she had obtained the Golden Sphere, which was the complete secret code of life, had she absorbed such a vast amount of energy. As for Ling Han, the secret code of life that he had obtained was not complete at all, so how could it compare to hers? Extermination was unable to accept this. Ling Han's current strength was completely unreasonable. "Surprised, right?" Ling Han said calmly. "There's something that would shock you even more. He had only used 10% of his power, and this was already enough to fight against Extermination. Thus, if he went all out, suppressing Extermination would be a piece of cake." Extermination gritted her teeth and shouted, "Damn brat! How dare you snatch my opportunity!" Hysteria didn't know that if it wanted to break out of this small pond, it had to obtain the energy of the entire void. Only then could it blast open the barrier that transcended the dimensional level and enter the mysterious and unknown new world. Extermination knew of this because she had witnessed the destruction of the Genesis world twice, and had even obtained the tiny bits of consciousness of the Genesis world. But now, she speculated that half of the power had been obtained by Ling Han. This meant that she was unable to open that door and enter the new world. How could he do this? This world, including the void, had been sucked dry, and no new Genesis world could be born, leaving behind an inexhaustible emptiness. Who could withstand living in such a world for countless epochs? Just thinking about it was enough to drive one crazy. No, there was still hope. Extermination stared at Ling Han. "As long as I kill you and obtain the energy in your body, I can still open that door and enter into a new world." "Stop dreaming." Hysteria sneered. "That doesn't exist at all. Otherwise, I would have gone out long ago." It was no longer a match for its previous incarnation, but if it had the chance, it didn't mind delivering a blow to this opponent from its previous life. Extermination sneered. "Idiot, what you're seeing isn't a real door at all, but coordinates, a weak point in space. As long as you absorb the power of the void and bombard that point, the real door will open." Oh, so that was how it was. Hysteria, Shatter Mountains, and the others all came to a realization. No wonder they couldn't charge out no matter what. It turned out that they were too weak and didn't have the qualifications to open that door. It was no wonder that the door didn't seem to exist. It was untouchable and unreachable. Indeed, it was only a guide and not a real existence. Extermination let out a long howl and used all sorts of techniques repeatedly, attacking Ling Han. However, Ling Han ignored her, and instead focused his gaze on Shatter Mountains and the others. "You old bastards, I told you to work hard at the front line, but not only did you not listen to my advice, you even hooked up with this damn transvestite. You even colluded with Hysteria and caused the destruction of the Genesis world. Let me ask you, do you regret it?" He moved as fast as lightning and grabbed Shatter Mountains in his hand. As early as when Ling Han had just advanced into the 6th tier, Shatter Mountains had already been no match for him. Now, not only had Ling Han reached the 7th tier, he had also absorbed almost 90% of the entire Void's energy. There were millions of transcendent dimensions in his body. What kind of concept was this? To say nothing of one 7th tier, even if 100 million 7th tiers joined forces, they might not be able to stop him. Shatter Mountains was shocked, and his entire body was covered in cold sweat. "Put him down!" Extermination roared, her tone sharp. She hated Shatter Mountains and the others to death, and it was precisely because she hated them to the core that she had to personally kill these 4 people. Otherwise, how could she vent the anger in her heart? After so many years, what kept her from going crazy was the desire for revenge. Now, as she reached the peak, she was about to taste the sweetness of revenge. However, this satisfaction was suddenly snatched away. How could she not be furious? She acted as if she had gone mad, and attacked Ling Han with all her might. Lin Luo and all the others had complicated expressions on their faces. A dignified ultimate elite of 7th tier had actually become a toy that was being fought over. It wasn't that Ling Han and Extermination wanted the battle prowess of the 7th tier. They just wanted to kill him with their own hands. Even though they were standing on opposite sides with Shatter Mountains, Lin Luo and the others were incomparably emotional because they were also 7th tiers, so it was inevitable that they would have some complicated emotions. As for Big Dipper, Half Moon, and Mysterious Feather, these 3 heavenly venerates only felt a sense of empathy towards Shatter Mountains. Being targeted by both Ling Han and Extermination, how could they not feel distressed in their hearts when either one could easily crush the 3 of them to death? After the death of Shatter Mountains, it would be their turn. Ling Han completely didn't care, and one of his hands casually parried Extermination's incomparably terrifying attacks, while his other hand gripped Shatter Mountain's neck. With the force of his 5 fingers, Shatter Mountain's neck bones emitted crisp cracking sounds. What indestructible physique of 7th tier! In front of the current Ling Han, it was so fragile that it couldn't even withstand a single blow. "Old thief, do you regret it or not?" Ling Han asked again. "I regret it," Shatter Mountains said in a hoarse voice. He truly regretted cooperating with Extermination and bringing his own end. He didn't even know that he had been betrayed, and they just had to go against a freakish fellow like Ling Han. Otherwise, with Ling Han fighting against Extermination now, they might even have a chance of winning. As long as Ling Han won, he would be able to open that door and bring them to the new world. What a happy ending that would be. But now? It was too late for regrets. "It's good that you regret it." Ling Han nodded and squeezed his 5 fingers. "Pa!" Shatter Mountains turned into a shower of blood. His gaze was baleful as he stared at Big Dipper, Mysterious Feather, and Half Moon. Chapter 3086, 3086 Killing Ultimate Elites Like Slaughtering Chickens. Chapter 3086, 3086 Killing Ultimate Elites Like Slaughtering Chickens. 3086 Killing Ultimate Elites Like Slaughtering Chickens. "No!" Extermination screamed as if she had lost both her parents, but also like she had gone mad. Vengeance against Chong Yin and the others was already her obsession. She didn't know how many times she had thought about how to kill them one by one, but the immortality and indestructibility of a 7th tier wasn't just for show. It was only now that she finally had the ability to casually slaughter 7th tiers. However, Shatter Mountains had been killed by Ling Han. This simply made her heart ache. "You bastard! I'm going to shred your corpse into 10,000 pieces." Extermination attacked with all her might, intending to blast Ling Han into pieces. Hee. Ling Han only smiled faintly. Previously, everything had been manipulated by Extermination and Hysteria, the great demon of 2 generations, Lin Luo, Chong Yin, and other 7th-tier ultimate elites could be said to have become her chess pieces, played easily in the palm of her hand. Now, it was no longer up to her. Ling Han fixed his gaze on Half Moon and charged straight at him. Previously, Half Moon and the other 2 ultimate elites had already started fleeing. However, they no longer had any fundamental power left to extract and utilize. They could only rely on their own power to display their might. This greatly affected their speed. In terms of power, who else could compare to Ling Han? Ling Han had only taken a single step forward, but had already caught up to Half Moon. He reached out to grab him. "How dare you!" Extermination let out an enraged roar and chased after him crazily. But could she make it in time? Ling Han stretched out his hand, and Half Moon fell into it. "Old bastard, do you regret it?" Half Moon gritted his teeth. He had already seen it before. Shatter Mountains became a dead man after saying that he regretted it. Therefore, he had to grit his teeth and keep his mouth shut no matter what. No regrets? Ling Han exerted strength in his hands, and under the pressure of unparalleled power, Half Moon's bones made a cracking sound. His face even turned purple-red as he felt extreme pain. Instead, it was extermination that stopped. She knew that it was impossible for her to snatch him back from Ling Han's hands. So, she set her eyes on Big Dipper and Mysterious Feather. Although she couldn't exact a perfect revenge, it was better than not being able to kill even one of them, right? She flew towards Big Dipper. Big Dipper and Mysterious Feather really didn't know how to describe their feelings at this moment. As dignified 7th-tier ultimate elites, they had actually fallen so far from Gracito, the point of becoming prey that were hunted by others. This was truly too tragic. 7th tier. They were 7th tiers, the greatest in the world. Yellow sand. Hysteria roared and moved its tentacles to grab him. It also hated extermination the most, even if it clearly knew that it was no match for her, but it still came forward to stop her. Scram! Extermination slashed down with her hand, and Hysteria was instantly sent flying, with golden blood flowing as another tentacle was cut off. However, Hysteria was laughing loudly because Ling Han had already caught up and intercepted extermination. Ling Han shook his head inwardly. This Hysteria was really stupid. Even without it trying to hinder her, Ling Han could easily catch up to extermination because he had obtained 90% of the power of the void. He was absolutely invincible. Forget it. He didn't need to feel sorry for it anyway. Do you regret it or not? Ling Han parried extermination while still suppressing Half Moon. The terrifying power was simply not something a 7th-tier physique could contend against, causing Half Moon to scream incessantly. He persisted for a long time before finally saying, "I do. I regret it." Firstly, he really couldn't withstand it any longer. He felt like he was better off dead than alive. He might as well pray for a good death to free himself. Secondly, this was indeed the truth. He regretted it. He regretted listening to extermination's words. He regretted not going all out and killing Ling Han, who had still been very weak at the time. All right, then die. Ling Han squeezed hard. Pa! Half Moon also turned into a mist of blood. Ling Han! Ling Han! Ling Han! Extermination roared loudly, her eyes burning with rage, reaching a state of extreme fury. "What are you screaming for? It's not your turn yet," Ling Han said calmly. He looked at Mysterious Feather and Big Dipper. Who was going to be next? As his gaze swept over them, Mysterious Feather and the other felt a sense of sorrow and endless despair. Extermination had also entered a berserk state. She panted heavily with a ferocious expression on her face. Her eyes suddenly lit up as she stared at Hysteria. If she killed it and plundered its power, then she would be evenly matched with Ling Han. Now, she would definitely win. Yes, that was it. She let out a long howl and charged towards Hysteria. Ordinary 7th tiers were useless as their power was less than 1/1,000,000th of hers. What was the use of plundering them? Ling Han smiled, and his figure darted out. He actually arrived first, grabbing one of Hysteria's tentacles, and then abruptly flung it out. Pong! Hysteria instantly transformed into a streak of light that shot toward the endless void. It's not your turn yet. Stay in line and wait, Ling Han said, and turning around, he charged towards Big Dipper. Big Dipper also stopped running. He knew that Ling Han was already strong enough to instantly obliterate heaven and earth. I regret it, he said directly. Rather than being ravaged and killed, it was better to seek a good death. Pong! Ling Han threw a punch and blasted Big Dipper into smithereens without showing any mercy. Since he had betrayed them, he had to be prepared to die. Ling Han looked at Mysterious Feather again, and his killing intent did not diminish even after killing 3 ultimate elites. Instead, it became even more intense. Mysterious Feather also accepted his fate and closed his eyes. What I regret the most is listening to that B*TH's words. Also, that I didn't kill you when I had the chance. Unrepentant. Ling Han snorted coldly and threw a punch. Pong! Mysterious Feather was also killed. At this point, all of the ultimate elites of the Genesis world of the last era had been annihilated. Oh, actually that wasn't the case. Strictly speaking, there were also Extermination and Hysteria. They all came from the Genesis world of the last era. Golden Silk Moth and 10,000 Shadows trembled. In front of Ling Han, 7th-tier elites were like toys, and could be blown to bits simply by a raise of his hand. They hadn't broken through to 7th tier for long, and hadn't enjoyed much of such prestige yet. They didn't want to die at all. Fearful things just had to come. Ling Han had already set his sights on them. You, what else do you have to say? Ling Han asked calmly. What could they say? What was the use of regretting now? Hadn't Shatter Mountains and the others all been killed? 10,000 Shadows' first reaction was to flee. Facing Ling Han, this had already become his normal reaction, but now he was completely unable to move his legs. He only felt that his entire body was powerless, and he was unable to move at all. Golden Silk Moth gritted his teeth and knelt down in front of Ling Han. Greetings, Master. Ling Han was stunned, and only then did he remember. Back then, when he was at the 5th tier, he had already suppressed Golden Silk Moth, wanting to take in a 7th tier as his servant. Later on, Golden Silk Moth had run away, and he thought no more of this matter. Now that the Golden Silk Moth was calling himself a servant, it was obvious that it wanted to use this to trade for his life. I don't need a useless slave like you, Ling Han said. Betrayal required a price to be paid, so how could Ling Han be fooled just by him kneeling down and discarding his dignity? He stretched out his hands and grabbed outward. Golden Silk Moth and 10,000 Shadows landed onto his hands. 7th tiers. Right now, they were really nothing more than a trash-like existence. Since you have nothing to say, go die. Ling Han's arms jolted. Pong, pong. The 2 ultimate elites immediately turned into a rain of blood. Chapter 3087, 3087, One Body. Chapter 3087, 3087, One Body. 3087, One Body. Extermination's chest rose and fell rapidly. She was enraged, extremely enraged. Since Ling Han killed her people, she would die. She charged towards Lin Luo and the others. Ling Han humphed, and his figure moved swiftly, blocking Extermination's path. Your opponent is me, he said calmly. Pong! With a punch, Extermination was sent flying. What? Extermination's beautiful face paled. In this strike, she discovered that her strength was much inferior to Ling Han's. Damn transvestite, don't disgust me. Ling Han could feel his goosebumps rising. Thinking back to Extermination's flirtatious expression previously, all that remained was incomparable disgust. Deep down, Extermination was a man, and she was heavenly venerate Yellow Sand. Extermination let out a piercing scream. In her opinion, what difference was there in being a man or a woman? Having reached the height of the 7th tier, was there still a need to care about gender? However, after being insulted by Ling Han like this, she really couldn't tolerate it. Nonetheless, she did not engage in a fierce battle with Ling Han. Instead, she turned around and chased in the direction of where Hysteria had disappeared. Only by killing Hysteria and plundering its power would she be able to compete with Ling Han. Of course, she was being delusional, but this was also the only solution that she could think of now. She exerted a terrifying force, and her delicate body moved at an indescribable speed. She gave chase while searching for Hysteria's life force fluctuations. There was only emptiness here, and there were no more energy storms, so the aura of life couldn't be concealed. Even a little bit of it would have been distinctively evident. As Extermination tracked Hysteria down, her figure moved faster and faster. In just half a day, Hysteria's figure appeared ahead of her. With 2 severed tentacles, it looked rather miserable. Right now, Hysteria had already descended from its strongest level, but it was still unbelievably strong. It could still suppress Lin Luo and all the other heavenly venerates by itself. Die! Extermination charged over. Her 5 fingers were like claws as she grabbed Hysteria. Hysteria roared and attacked with its tentacles. Pong! Hysteria was naturally at a huge disadvantage in this exchange. Compared to Extermination, it was far inferior, and another one of its tentacles got blasted off again. Don't kill it. This one is also mine. Ling Han's voice rang out. He was calm and unruffled, just like a person who was protecting his food, warning others not to snatch his food. Extermination gritted her teeth. She attacked crazily. If she didn't kill Hysteria and use all its power, she wouldn't be able to suppress Ling Han. If she couldn't suppress Ling Han, she wouldn't be able to leave this space, and could only go crazy in this kind of emptiness and cold desolation. Ling Han also made his move. How could he allow Extermination to kill Hysteria? If it was to be killed, he would be the only one to do it. He easily blocked Extermination with one hand as he fixed his gaze upon Hysteria. Hysteria's remaining 5 tentacles fluttered gently. Facing Ling Han, it felt an unprecedented chill. It moved and pounced forward. However, its target was actually not Ling Han, but Extermination. Was it courting death? Even Ling Han had not expected that Hysteria would charge over, dashing towards Extermination. Not bad, not bad. Since you're going to die anyway, why don't you give me your power? At the very least, I'm still a manifestation of your previous life. Extermination laughed loudly as she extended her slender hand. Pooh! It directly pierced through Hysteria's head. Boom! Hysteria's 5 tentacles surged wildly, and its golden body rapidly dimmed. Its energy was rapidly depleting, while continuously being plundered by Extermination. Ling Han originally wanted to stop her, but after thinking about it again, he decided to let it go. In fact, he had absorbed almost 90% of the Void's power by himself, while the remaining power had been divided between Hysteria and Extermination, with Extermination having taken up 90% of the remaining power. Therefore, it didn't matter whether the power of Hysteria was being absorbed by Extermination or not. Let her rejoice in vain. Ling Han watched from the side. Very soon, Extermination would know that what she was facing was an insurmountable mountain. Hysteria's golden body quickly turned silver, then white, and finally black, as if it was degenerating. This process was really fast. Extermination shook lightly, and Hysteria then turned to ashes and completely disappeared. The great calamity that had once harmed the 2 generations of Genesis world was gone just like that. Shio. Lin Luo and the others also rushed over and happened to see this last scene. They couldn't help but feel slightly emotional. Ling Han. Extermination shouted loudly. After absorbing the power of Hysteria, her power had increased by more than 10%, and she was filled with confidence, believing that it was enough to suppress Ling Han. At their heights, even a minute increase in power would have been staggering, not to mention increasing their power by 10%. It could even change the outcome of the battle. I'm not deaf, so there's no need to shout so loudly, Ling Han said calmly. He even dug his ears, appearing very nonchalant. I want you, Extermination said, but before she could say the words to die, she was stunned. Then, She suddenly hugged her head. Hysteria, you're really haunting me. I've clearly destroyed your physical body, but you've entered my mind with your spirit. Ling Han's expression darkened slightly. This, I want you, wasn't expressed clearly and was quite ambiguous. Moreover, the person who said this was a damn transvestite. Just thinking about it made one feel disgusted. You want to fight with me for control of this body? How naive. Extermination roared. Get out, get out. But then, Extermination said, this body was originally mine. Even though you refined it, it is still more compatible with my soul. I am the master of this body. Get lost. I've plotted for so many years before this happened, and you want to reap the fruits of my labor? Winner takes all. Why are you spouting so much nonsense? Extermination seemed to be talking to herself, but Ling Han, Lin Luo, and the others all knew that this was actually two souls, Extermination and Hysteria, fighting for control of this body. This might seem a little confusing. Since Hysteria's physical body had already been destroyed and returned to its original form, it was better to call her Extermination, but Extermination was actually heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand. The two souls were fighting, and a strange scene appeared. Another head actually grew out of Extermination's neck. You! The original head shouted sharply. Of course, it represented Yellow Sand. Haha, this is my body. Even after being tempered by you for so many years, I can still obtain half of the command, the new head said. This was naturally Hysteria, the earliest Extermination. Get out of here. You're the one who should get lost. The two heads shouted at each other, each commanding one hand to fight. This, Ling Han felt speechless. Was this still the number one ferocious beast of the world? Why did he look like a freak and a retard? Forget it. I won't be watching such a show anymore. How disgusting. Since the two fiends had already merged into one, he would deal with them together. Ling Han threw a punch at Extermination. Ha! Extermination's two heads roared furiously at the same time as each one commanded the one hand on either side to meet Ling Han's attack. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.